Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions. Your host, Brian. We're going to wrap up this week, as we usually do, with an album review, going through an entire album track by track, exploring each song in isolation and their part of the larger whole. Today we're going to be looking at a group that we've had on the channel once before, I believe. They're called Manic Street Preacher. We're going to be looking at their 1994 album, The Holy Bible. We have 13 tracks ahead of us, just shy of 1 hour of music. I feel this video is going to be a bit on the longer side as we have a larger track list and pretty much a longer album too. Let's dive into this first track. It is one of the longer ones. Most of these songs seem to be about in the 3-minute range. We have a handful in 5, and then we do have a 6 to wrap up the album. This one's just called Yes. Let's see what Manic Street Preacher is bringing to the table today.
You can buy her. You can buy her. This one's here. This one's here. This one's here. And this one's here. Everything's for sale.
15-beat phrase, 4-3-4-4. It's a little off kilter in the middle of it. Interesting production to it. It's kind of, I don't know, it's like the opposite of Scoops. I feel like it's kind of lacking in the low end and the high ends. Oh, there's a fuller sound, but this is hyper compressed. Something about the vocals are familiar to me too. Can't quite place it. Constantly rising guitar chords in there.
Shut their spell.
Interesting, the two different guitar tones on this. All right. So have kind of like a punky rock thing going on here. Parts of this feel more rockier. Some other sections feel punkier. There's not a lot of elements in the vocals that really lead me to punk. It's just more of a, I don't know, I think it's more of a drum vibe there. What's interesting though, I think, is that most of this feels a bit on the lighter side, but has bite to it. It may be because it's 1994. I do think knowing some of the big rock singles from the 90s, rock could have a lot of bite. This, I don't think necessarily has it in the music, but there's something about its energy that I get. I don't know. I hope they continue this on because I want to continue to revisit this as we move forward here. When I think of abrasive music, I tend to think of big walls of sound, guitar tones with a lot of compression to them, distortion, overdrive. And to be fair, this guitar over here is incredibly buzzy. So it has some personality. It has some character to it. But also really aggressive drumming and aggressive vocals, shouted, delivered with full force. It's very surface level. I don't think I've ever got the gist of aggression from production before, and I'm getting that here, and I'd love to explore that more. And I do hope they continue to do this, or maybe I continue to get this vibe so I can explore it through this album and try to figure out what exactly is at play here for that. And it may even just be the off-kilter elements of it too. We do have that 15-beat phrase for our verse, which is very awkward. That is not exactly welcoming to the audience. But there's also the rhythm in the chorus, which for a while I thought was actually 1 beat short, or maybe half of a beat short. Yeah, half of a beat short if we were in 7/8. But it's actually the vocalist emphasizing what should be beat 1 of the next bar, half of a beat early. The next sentence starts on the and of 4, where the drums then emphasize beat 1 after that. And listening to the vocals, I actually thought that we were lurching into that next note earlier than we were. Counting it out, following the drum beat, this is just a 4/4 section. The vocalist is just jumping the gun and holding on to that first beat a little bit longer because they started it a little bit earlier. But that is a little disorienting too, where the vocals and the drums are not really on the same page there. We have a double accent. It may be little things like that that create this feeling of aggression, or I don't know. Again, I use the word punkiness. I don't think that's necessarily descriptive. But there is sort of a punk attitude in here. even if I don't know where it is in particular. Because when we explore the rest of the track, we have some cool bass line work in here, a lot of pedal tone, follow the chord work. The guitars are doing a lot of chordal playing in here, so the bass following along with that makes sense. But if you key into the bass, and it's fairly easy to, the bass is fairly prominent within the mix, in the center channel, you can find a lot of moving bass lines. In fact, I think the bass composition is slightly more difficult than the guitar composition in general. It simply has more moving lines to it. The guitars are just doing a lot of chordal work in here. So I found that to be really cool. The bass just works exceptionally well in this track at pushing the song forward. The drums have some nice fills to them, but they're kind of locked into their groove, their beat. They're kind of doing that human metronome thing. And like I said, the guitars are very chord based. There are some single note licks. The verse has more of them than anywhere else, but the chorus and the bridge, post-chorus, I'm not really sure what the structure of this track is because there's a lot of it. It may be that we have some sort of like a verse, chorus, post-chorus, and then we do that a second time, and then there's a bridge, and then we do it a third time, which gives us 10 sections to this track, which for a 5-minute song makes sense, but it also feels very overkill. It feels like there's a lot, but when I think back to the music, there's not really a lot of diversity through the track. It's just that when I pay attention to the vocals, I kind of get that vibe based on what they're doing. But I'm also a bit lost once we hit, I don't know, like the 3-minute mark, and there may actually have been more going on than I picked up on. It might be less pattern based once we get in there. We'll find all of that hopefully when we hit the lyrics. Hopefully they're nicely formatted, and at least on the lyrical side, we can see what kind of structure we're looking at. But generally speaking, we have moving bass ideas, chords on the guitars, metronomic drum work, and semi-catchy melodies from the vocals. I say semi-catchy because I do think that in the moment I found them to be catchy, but after a single listen, there's nothing I can hum back at you. I do think that there are some earworms. You listen to this a couple of times, it won't take a lot, and you'll be able to hum back some of the vocal melodies, but it's not something that is immediately ear-catching. Like, I don't know, Lady Gaga does a really good job at this. You listen to a song once, Poker Face, even if you've only heard that song one time, that chorus gets stuck in your head and you're able to sing it back. Part of that is because you hear that chorus like 7 times in that track. But it is incredibly memorable. And so when I say something is memorable, when we're talking about melodies and stuff like that, that it's catchy, that's more of a spectrum. It's not like it is or isn't catchy, but some things are infinitely more catchy than others, and that doesn't mean that the other things aren't catchy at all. And I think that somewhere in this track, or that this track sits somewhere in the middle, where they are memorable things, they just take more than one listen to catch on to. Or it could be also that I was listening to so much of the rest of this track too, that I wasn't paying as much attention to that. Maybe if you listen to this vocally oriented, like I imagine a lot of people do, maybe not inside metal, but rock and pop and maybe more mainstream styles of music, maybe it is something you can immediately hum back on your first time. The last thing I want to bring up, this has felt a bit more scatterbrained than usual. I apologize. Usually I have things more structured in my mind and I have nice segues between ideas. But the next and maybe last thing I want to bring up is, what is this song saying? Because a lot of this is musically simple. I don't want that to be a dismissive term, but it is a simple track. There just isn't a lot of wild, complex ideas in it. It is a song that exists within emotions and atmospheres. It has its chords, and then there's melodies on top of that. It's not like we have, wild guitar solos in here. We don't have metric modulation. We don't have well, we do have some tempo or temporal modulation with that random 3/4 thrown into the second bar of the verse. But, it's not a progressive track here. This, I think, is fairly radio rock friendly with a little bit of bite. And the complexity to me really comes through the length, the structure of it. But all of the individual ideas are fairly straightforward. And so what are all of these individual ideas trying to say collectively? And I'm not really sure about this because there is minutia in here that just seems to be at odds with everything. I would say it's a fairly upbeat track. When I listen to the chord progression of the chorus, when I listen to the bass work and the guitar riff of the verse, when I listen to the vocal, we'll talk about the vocals in a second. When I listen to the instrumentation though, I think there is a generally positive vibe to everything. This is compounded by the consistent motifs of rising or escalation. I mentioned in the chorus that the guitar chords just keep going. There are some pedal chords. I think this guitar over here just kind of locks onto a single chord and holds that as some sort of foundation, some sort of home chord for everything else to be felt against. But particularly over here on the right, there's just an escalation. The chord notes, the pitches within the chords continue to rise. I don't know if the chord itself actually changes. That is to say, I don't know if the intervals between each of the notes in the chord is actually being modified. The intervals are what gives a chord its character, its vibe. As long as the space between each of the notes is the same, it really doesn't matter what those notes are, they're going to evoke the same emotion. And I feel that when I'm listening to this, where there isn't a lot of emotive change within this rising progression, but there is pitch increase. The notes are getting higher, but it's not telling me, at least, a diverse story of emotions. It just feels like pitch escalation. And so that feels like rising up above too. That goes along with these ideas of positivity. But then I hear the vocals, or I guess the vocals are center channel, but that looks like I'm pointing at you. And you weren't singing in this track, unless you are the vocalist of this, in which case, hi, welcome to the channel. The vocals though feel, I don't know the word for it. I was gonna say dreary. I don't think that's accurate. A gut reaction here was going to make a slight joke and call them emo. I don't think that's accurate either, though. There is something of a negative bend, a darkness to the vocal melody that I don't think is necessarily fully represented in the harmonic work laid out by the guitars. And it's such a wild juxtaposition. I don't pick it up too much in the verse. It's there, but it's hidden. But the chorus is almost fully featured here. This clash between the atmosphere of the instruments and this melody line of the vocals. And I think most of this track, aside from looking at individual ideas, was spent trying to reconcile the difference that I felt here. And I don't know. This might be one of those situations where I just need lyrics to have another perspective on this, another point of view to understand the track better. I wouldn't call this bittersweet. There's a duality here. It's not necessarily in tandem. It's like one within the other. But some tracks I can hear the schism and come to a conclusion about it. But this one, I don't know if it's me. I don't know if the song is intentionally vague about it. I don't really get anything beyond just the presence of these two emotions. And I think that's interesting because I've been kind of lost on this whole track. As straightforward as it seems, it has complexity to it. There's a hidden punkiness or aggressiveness that I can't quite place, and the emotive side of things is not something I have a strong read on. I kind of understand it's there, I see it's there, but I don't know what it represents. It's very rare for me to be in this position. Either a song completely confounds me and I can appreciate the technicalities of it, or I really get a track. And this one has me kind of lost in the middle. Let's hit some lyrics. We'll see if that sheds any light on this. And we'll keep pushing forward. All right. Very interesting title for this song. It is a rather vulgar track, particularly, I think, for 1994. I'm kind of surprised at some of this. I'm curious how popular Manic Street Preachers were. I had never heard of them until introduced to them while doing a reaction to them. So, despite being around in the 90s, I didn't hear about them until the 2020s. But I also don't think I have seen or heard some of these lyrics in anything from the 90s except for underground music. This is simply put, I talked about earlier how this musically was kind of a standard radio rock song, but lyrically this would never get airtime, at least not in the States. And so the vulgarity, though, it is warranted. But I'm also not going to go through this line by line like I usually do. We're going to touch on main themes here. But the idea is mostly depersonalization, removing the humanity from someone through the lens of prostitution, and specifically looking at the sex worker themselves. It speaks about how outside forces view them as worthless, non-human property. They are a thing. And through this, it's massively destructive to the psyche and mental state of these people. But it also speaks to the power dynamic between those without and those with, where power in this case, I think, typically leans more towards those with money and those without money, those who are forced to do stuff that maybe they wouldn't normally because they need money, and then the people who do these things because they have the money. And there's one other element to this. What was it? Oh, yeah, the destruction of personal enjoyments and stuff. It talks about how being a sex worker becomes very dulling. That even things that were found enjoyable previously no longer are. It's removed the pleasure from someone's life. But there's also the inverse of this too, that all of this is framed as a world of pleasure. Particularly though for the people who are paying for this. They can get whatever they want in this area. In this, I don't know what you would call it. In this market, that sounds incredibly dehumanizing. But that is sort of the part of this track, and what they're exploring too is the dehumanization of all of this. But I wonder if that little bit of darkness, again, sadness feels closest, but that doesn't feel like the right word either, is supposed to be the sex worker's perspective, which a lot of this track is told through their perspective within an environment that is sold and marketed as pleasurable. There is joy and happiness and upbeat. You can do whatever you want. There's this freedom that is marketed. But of course, that freedom comes at the cost of someone else's autonomy, of someone else's wants and needs. And so maybe that's where the schism in the music is what it's supposed to be exploring. I'm not 100% confident on that, but I want to be. It feels a bit more nuanced than the music lets on, but it could be that the simplicity of the music was done purposefully to make this schism felt as nuanced as it might be. There's also 2 samples in here. They come from a documentary called Hookers, Hustlers, Pimps, and Their Johns. Both of them are really focusing on the dehumanization of the sex workers themselves. And they bookend this track. The very first track on this album has 2 sampled quotes from a documentary in it. Heavy topic to kick an album off with, and I had mentioned that the title of this track was interesting. It's called Yes. Yes is a sort of, well, I think within the context here, it's one that speaks of well, maybe not necessarily enthusiasm, but consent. And this track is really not about that at all. It seems rather tongue-in-cheek, which I think adds to the general sarcastic vibe I get through a lot of this. Not necessarily sarcastic about this topic, but the perspective occasionally shifts back to a pimp, and we get these very dehumanizing, degrading lines throughout this track. And those tend to feel a bit more, sarcasm's not the right word for it, but there's a bite. It understands what it is and almost puts it on showcase to say, look, this is ugly, but we're going to show it exactly how it is. And I think that having the word yes, the consent as the title, really showcases that. All right. Now, I did look at some of these other track titles too. The next one is absolutely bonkers. It runs off in Deezer, so let me see. Oh, it runs off on Genius too. If white America told the truth for one day, its world would fall apart. All one word. Track 3 is Of Walking Abortion. 4 is She Is Suffering. 5 is Archives of Pain. 8 is Mausoleum. 11 is Die in the Summertime. 12 is The Intense Humming of Evil. I'm not expecting this to be a positive album at all. I'd say that this was not a good day for it, but I don't know if there's any day that I'm really looking forward to just an abysmal look on humanity. I get enough of that in my day-to-day life. So, as usual, I'm going to try to get through the album. It is called the Holy Bible, which kind of cracks me up now that I think about it. I'm curious how the rest of this album is going to play into that. Let's dive in, though. If white America told the truth one day, for one day, its world would fall apart. What a title. Let's see what's going on here.
Next Thursday, you're invited to watch Rising Tide's live coverage of a gala tribute and salute to Ronald Reagan. Host Haley Barbour joins special guest Lady Margaret Thatcher in celebrating the former president's 83rd birthday. Tickets are $1,000 a plate, but you can see the event free on GOP TV.
Another rising idea, though. Oh, very dark and tense. very punky energy with his vocal delivery, though. I've heard this chord in a track too. It's incredibly unbalanced, but also ambiguous too. Is it mysterious? Is it dangerous? Is it tense? It's kind of a little of all three. This chorus, though, I could hear Sum 41 doing something like this. Another interesting track. This one, though, certainly feels punkier. The chorus feels like something I could hear. In fact, I might have even heard something very similar to it from Sum 41. Pop punk would just fit right into that. But between the chord progressions, the dual vocals, where one has a slower line holding out notes, kind of moving with the chord progression, and the other one is a bit faster. The verse, though, I've heard that chord somewhere, as ambiguous as it is, and I can't place it. It's kind of driving me up a wall, but the vocal delivery clearly reminds me of the guitarist from System of a Down. Completely blanking on his name. Darren. Yeah, that's his name. And subsequently, I think Scars on Broadway, which really highlights this sort of rigid staccato delivery that I think he favors in his writing at times. And so it's really interesting because this feels like, I don't know, maybe not directly influencing those, but again, I think it's really cool when you all show me this older music. And one of the first things I think of is, wow, this sounds just like this other band that came out, years later. It's really neat to see the evolution of music as someone who really didn't listen to a lot of music. My worldview of music is very condensed prior to starting this channel, which may be something really interesting to say for a composer, but it's true. Finding music was, I just kind of relied on landing into it. So, I mean, I guess I kind of am. I'm not actively searching for music now. Not much has changed. Just my sources have expanded, and y'all have been phenomenal in that regard. I really appreciate all of y'all's knowledge of music, both in what music is doing, but also just a wide knowledge of what all music is out there. It's been very cool diving into some of this older stuff and exploring it primarily through a lens of someone who mostly knows rock and metal from like a 2000s to 2010 perspective. But anyways, I find it really interesting that I listen to this track and almost every part of it I can liken to something else I've heard that came later. Through that perspective, though, I think most of us will admit that Sum 41 and pop punk in general is very different from nu metal and System of a Down. And yeah, I think that comes through pretty clearly in the music. The chorus and the verse are incredibly distinct. I'm not really sure how to understand these two ideas back to back. They are both neat. I think they're cool segments. Not sure what they have to do with one another. Really don't see how they inform one another either. We also have the general vibe between both of them. The chorus is rather upbeat and poppy. There's, once again, ascending ideas. Actually, I think both of them. No, it's just the chorus has the ascending idea to it. I'm really curious if that's a sort of a trademark idea of theirs, or if it is much like Yes, an important component to understanding this, and maybe we'll hear it less in future tracks, but at least for here, it's just coincidental that both of the opening tracks use escalating pitch in the guitar parts. The bass continues to do some cool stuff. The drums are fairly more consistent on this than the first track, little less room for drum fills on this one. But when we look at the emotional contrast of our verse and chorus, like I was saying, the chorus is upbeat and bouncy, but the verse is ambiguously negative. There's a possibility of danger there, but it's also kind of mysterious, and I don't know, it's also kind of sad. It's a lot of things, and when I think I feel that way about it, it changes. It's a rather obtuse chord, and I'm curious what chord it is. But it's also not strummed completely, and I think this is what allows it to modulate its emotion, because you get one note at a time through it. The plucking of it is plucking? The picking of it is pretty quick, so we move through these emotions rapidly and reset, but it's still something that evolves over time because it isn't just one strum entirely. I find the juxtaposition between these two interesting. The vocals on the verse are also a bit more frantic. It's that quick staccato idea, but it's also super rigid. There's not a lot of syncopation within there. That feels almost stilted at times, a controlled rigidness within this ambiguous atmosphere that's generally negative. I'm not sure what to read into that. The chorus, though, pushes completely in the opposite direction, though. It's catchier, it's bouncier, it's poppier, it's funner, it's positive. Once again, just like Yes, we're looking at a duality, though this time instead of simultaneous, it's in opposition of, as if you're flipping the coin over and seeing the other half. And given the title, I wonder if this is supposed to be about what's on the surface level versus what's bubbling underneath. The positive projection of things versus the starker reality of things. We'll probably learn more about that when we hit the lyrics, but for right now, I think that's my guess on what we're doing there. There is a guitar solo in here, something we didn't have in the first track, and it was fine. I don't really, it filled space nicely. It wasn't a bad solo, but it didn't really expand on anything, and it wasn't technically impressive either. It just sort of was, but it did transition us nicely into the outro of the track, which was the noisiest thing we've heard on the album so far. I also felt like we got a new side of the vocalist on this track. It's a bit shoutier, what I would expect from something punk adjacent. which which is interesting given the punk vibes I got earlier in the album. And it might be this that I was actually kind of feeling. Maybe they are a punk band that just went for something a bit rockier on the first track, but you can't hide all of that about yourself. I don't know. We'll continue with this album, and I'll continue to explore this idea, this punk underbelly of this album, and see where that takes us. But I think right here we got a very clear idea of them leaning into that direction. The end of this track is fairly aggressive, and I think having the guitar with all of that buzziness coming in the solo, while not being too interesting on its own, is a great segue into what we would hear in the outro. Lyrics. This is an interesting track. It does, on the surface, kind of hit on the same ideas that the title makes you believe it will. It is, in some parts, anti-American. In fact, the first two lines are images of perfection, suntan, and napalm, Grenada, Haiti, Poland, Nicaragua, talking about areas that we have destroyed politically or even through war. Ways that we've found to get our fingers into and start messing with things. It says, who shall we choose for our morality? Then it says, I'm thinking right now of the Hollywood tragedy. Big Mac smack, Phoenix R, please smile, y'all. There's a very American culture to all of this. And it kind of juxtaposes some of the facade that we portray, that this country portrays, versus some of the realities of this country and its culture as well. It then says, your idols speak so much of the abyss, yet your morals only run as deep as the surface. I was like, okay, first verse is over. This is obviously an anti-American song. Let's see where this goes. But then the chorus says, there ain't no black in the Union Jack. There ain't enough white in the stars and stripes. And this is particularly interesting to me, because both of these are racist comments. I believe they're done in tongue-in-cheek, much like in Yes, where we change perspective to the pimp. This is changing perspective to a racist. These are racist rallying calls. But one of them is about the Union Jack. That's not American. That's the flag for, I don't remember, dude. It's like 2 or 3 countries, maybe, and the flag that represents all of them. I don't. One of them's England. One of them's Scotland. I don't know. Anyways, it's not the American flag. The next line, though, is not enough white in the stars and stripes. So right here, we have basically trashed America for 30 seconds or so, and then paralleled it to the Union. And I find that really interesting, because I'm curious what this is trying to state then. Unless he's trying to say that England is just as bad, or maybe becoming just as bad. I don't know. The second verse leans back into the ideas of America. We lean back into racism a little bit. Says vital stats. How white was their skin? Unimportant, just another inner city drive-by thing. Talking about how black on black crime is typically reported less and used in violent statistics less because it's not important enough. And that's pretty much the whole track. There's a pre-chorus that I'm not entirely sure. I mean, it just basically adds on to other things. We bring up Tipper Gore, who was the wife of Al Gore, and her push for family-friendly stuff. I think she did like the parental labels on, it wasn't video games, because that was I think that was a couple years after this album came out. So it must have been music then? That must have been the time when the Twisted Sister vocalist went to, was it Congress, and had to talk about how music was art. Has an incredible actual speech by him. Really great job. I'm a bit off topic, but I think that's what's going on there. It doesn't necessarily, it just says Tipper Gore was a friend of mine. So I'm not sure what the point of bringing that up. Then it says, I love a free country, the stars and stripes, and an apple from Mummy. Once again, we have this, I believe, parallel, stars and stripes being America. Apple for Mummy, I don't know if that's a English thing, but Mummy certainly is. So, I don't know. Again, the parallel is drawn. The outro is upset about the Brady Bill. And then there's a quote that says, if God made man, Sam Colt made him equal. Sam Colt is the creator of the Colt firearm. And I believe that's a direct quote from Sam. So this is primarily a track that says this is what America pushes out to the world in a positive light, but here's also what they push out into the world in a negative light if you're actually paying attention. And then there are two parallels between America, particularly racism in America, and racism in England. And like I said, I don't really understand the point of that, unless, again, he's saying that England's getting just as bad. Maybe it is the culture export. I mean, that is America's biggest export, is culture. And it does influence other cultures. Maybe that's what he's saying. He's feeling too much American ideas being represented in England. Maybe on both the political level and the cultural level. But if you go back to the title, he seems pretty clear in stating that he feels that America mostly peddles lies, that what they push out into the world is not actually who they are. It is who they want to portray themselves as. But it doesn't take much to look beneath the surface and find out what's really being pushed. Another slightly heavy track there. Not quite as heavy as the first, I think, but a big topic that I think is tough to put down into just 3 minutes of music. It's a bit less nuanced than the topic really deserves, but I think it kind of works. The next track, though, is called Of Walking Abortion, and something tells me this is not going to be pleasant in any way. Let's dive in.
I knew that someday I was going to die. And
is this the third track that starts with a sample?
Two things would happen to me. That number one, I would regret my entire life. And number two, I would want to live my life over again.
Okay, I'm adapting to this guitar tone, but man, that was a wild shift. Odd note choices too. It's like a twisted Queensryche. What a wild sound. Dude, the tones of these instruments for this verse are wild. The little tongue trill. All right. For those who are a little more well versed in rock's history, where would Manic Street Preacher have been influenced by for stuff like this? Because once again, I see the future. Stuff that came after this sounding very similar to this. But it feels incredibly fresh when I think about 95, 94, and what I know, the music that I know from 94. I can't, this feels wild. And that's 2 for 2. Well, I guess 2 for 3. The first track certainly felt a little more of its time. Given my probably limited knowledge of the early to mid 90s. The first one shocked on lyrics though. So I guess all 3 of these tracks have been, they've had unexpected qualities to them. For me anyways, personally. The verse though, just what is going on? Every single instrument in this, well, I guess other than the drums, just sounds so wild. Everything feels alive and pulsating. And it's just, everything is moving. The bass guitar, the electric guitar, nothing is static here. And the whole song feels creepy because of that. But there's also like a super, I don't know, quasi-industrial element to it. I think it's that sort of texture manipulation that I expect from industrial music, of finding new ways to represent old sounds. That is to say that compositionally it isn't fresh, but the way it's delivered to my ears is. And that's sort of how I envision industrial as a concept. And that's what I get out of this too. I think that if you just looked at the sheet music, you'd be like, ah, yeah, pretty straightforward ideas. But the way it's presented, the tones that are used to play these notes are what makes it interesting. It's what makes it feel the way that it does. coming off of the opening sample was absolutely bonkers because we had something incredibly rooted in reality, just someone talking. And then from there went into this alien rock, incredibly moody, very dark and grimy atmosphere where the walls are writhing. That's what I felt like in that verse. The chorus shifts a bit in a different direction, and we get some simple chord progressions and some highly repetitive rhythmic ostinatos from the vocals. It's just kind of like one idea over and over. And it kind of locks into a sort of chant. There's very little differentiation in the vocal melody. It's mostly just this short idea, one bar idea, maybe two. The words change, but the pitches and the rhythms don't. They're just kind of locked in this repetitive cycle over and over and over and over. Everything locked in this short loop. It's got bite to it. It's a sharp sound in general, but it's also stuck in a way. The sounds are no longer wavy and moving. They're rigid. The instruments have been tamed here. And all of this growing into an outro where the vocalist is pretty much punk shouting. There's certainly some compression in the vocal delivery that haven't really heard too much of previously. We got a touch of it in track 2 as well. Certainly, though, the end of this track feels the punkiest that we've been. Every track seems to be pushing towards a more and more traditional punk sound. I still find this really interesting because I think if I listen to all this as a whole, I'd say it's a rock band with a punk attitude, but there's still some undeniable punkiness to all of this. And I don't know really what to attribute it to yet. Although I will say that the topics at hand and the bluntness of the lyrics, paired with some of the tones of the instruments and some of the riffs that we've heard, there's certainly a strong punky correlation and parallel throughout most of this. Even if it isn't, a bluntly punk music. I think that's about all I have to say about this one. Fairly straightforward track. Yeah, let's hit some lyrics. I'm having a tough time with this one. There is a lot going on, and it's all crammed into a very small amount of space. And I think that's ultimately, once again, what kind of makes it difficult to digest because it's a rather large topic it seems to be alluding to, crammed down into less than 4 minutes of music. We have elements in here that point to a general apathy of people. The first pre-chorus states, loser, liar, fake or phony, no one cares. But we also have, well, verse 2 brings up dictators. Mussolini, Hitler, Tiso, Horthy. They're all showcased differently, though. Mussolini is hanging from a butcher's hook, and Horthy's corpse is screened to a million. So here we have showcases of the death of a dictator. But Hitler is shown as reprising as a worm in people's soul, and Tiso is revived. Is it supposed to be talking about the rise and fall of fascism? That it moves in, I don't know, in waves? It comes and goes, or maybe it rises in some places, and when it falls, it rises in another, that you can't kill it like a hydra? I'm not really sure what the purpose of this verse is. It just says this and then moves on. The outro, though, says, who's responsible? You are. The massacred innocent blood stains us all. And this ties into a little bit of what we saw in, I guess it was the first verse. It says that those in power recognize the truths that a nation's moral suicide are the junkies, the winos, and the whores. So it finds a scapegoat. Those who do drugs, those who drink alcohol, and those who are sexually promiscuous. It doesn't actually point to anything that could be changed. It just creates a scapegoat. And, I wasn't really that cognizant of things in 94. I don't know why I keep forgetting that date. When this album came out, I was just a few years old then, but it's interesting how the scapegoat idea really hasn't changed much ever throughout history at all, even today. There's always someone you can point to say that they're the reason of your troubles. The dividing line, if you will. So there's a lot of ideas in here. There's the apathy and uncaringness of the average person. There's the apathy and even disdain of those in power for the average person. There's the rise and fall of fascism in here. And all of this, I suppose, is supposed to be tied together. The chorus is usually a sort of unifying idea in a track of taking the disparate verses and creating an overarching theme to them. But it just says, we are all walking abortions. Shalom, shalom. We all love our children. I'm so lost on that. I have no idea what they're trying to say here. It's a bit of dartboard lyrics where you put up a bunch of lyrics of despair on a dartboard and chuck a few darts in and say that's what the song's going to be about. And I don't know, maybe there is some through line in all of this. If you have a perspective of it, as usual, let me know. Throw that down in the comments. I'm eager to read other people's take on this, but it just seems to be a rather nihilistic view on humanity at large, kind of scatterbrained approach to exploring that. It doesn't have a very positive or optimistic view of humanity at all, which I don't blame them if you look at the catastrophes of life, but I think you're really removing the humanity angle out of that. As usual, you can paint large groups of people as rather negative, but very rarely have I met someone, literally met a single person and walked away thinking that they were just a terrible human being. And I think this song looks at larger ideas and never really gets down to the small one. And, I see the argument too. Does it really matter? Maybe, maybe not. There's philosophical debate to be had there, I suppose. But it seems like we're going outside the realms of just this track at that point. So let's move on. Now, I'm going to mention that we may begin running tracks together at this point. Maybe not, though. These two tracks have been rather unique, and while I think the analysis segments for them all have been on the shorter side, given how limited each of these tracks have really been, they have, a verse, a chorus, and usually they're a bit on the simpler side. They do have diverse sounds throughout all of them. So, I don't know. I'll play this one by ear, as usual. Let's move on to the next track, She Is Suffering. Ooh. A little bit of The Cure in here. Also with that vocal style, Smashing Pumpkins. Once again, something a little later. this massive guitar. There's a little one over here too. Yeah, this is a dark and moody track though. The guitar riffage is mostly through way of chord shaping. It is a melodic rhythm, but mostly about picking each note of the chord, rising and then falling. The offbeat ride cymbal. It's really interesting. Yeah, another functional solo. The first half of it is just playing the key tones that the guitars have already been playing, just minus the arpeggiation. Oh, little textured stuff over here. I do like the vocal delivery on this one too. It's very passionate, very emotive. Yeah, most of what I have to say about that is that it's dark and moody. Just going to push forward into the next track. We didn't really have too many rising ideas in that. We did have the arpeggiation though.
You damn well think you're God or something. God give life, God taketh it away, not you. I think you are the devil itself.
Massive bass tone. It's funky and off kilter like Primus. That bass is almost too big though, dude. I had to turn my volume down. Ooh. Very interesting rhythmic pattern on the vocals. That fuzziness. Wild harmony on that too. Almost as if it was a bit sharp. I love the drum work on this section. Such an awkward pull back into this. Oh, an accelerando? Okay. Probably their most interesting track so far. It's got interesting texture to it. It has a massive bass tone. It has a solo that does stuff. It goes somewhere. It builds melodically. It has wild changes throughout the track. It's a little all over the place. In a good way, maybe. It is a little too disjointed for me personally, but I still think I'm going to try to find some sort of cohesion through all of it too, simply because it feels like it should. It's not quite as wildly diverse as some of the other tracks on the album. There is something that holds it all together. And I think generally it's going to be the chord progression on this, which is dangerous and dark. And I think it's what makes the menacing finale work here and why it doesn't feel out of character for this track. It's something I certainly didn't predict, but it doesn't feel out of place either. A lot of this track harmonically explores that darkness, that danger. And I think that's what keeps everything together. Even the guitar solo, which I think kind of deviates a little bit away from this, pushes into a frantic anxiety, which feels pretty close to danger, even if it doesn't have that darkness as a core component. Because harmonically speaking, underneath that solo, we just have two chords. We have a rest and a tension. We're just bouncing back and forth between the two of them. We've kind of lost a lot of the more complex chordal movements from previously in the track. I don't know if that was done to create this sound to facilitate something for the solo to happen over, or if they were specifically aiming to reduce everything down and create this specific atmosphere for just a narrative reason rather than for, a functional reason for the guitarist. I don't know. But it still kind of clicks, even though it deviates quite a bit from the formula that the track had been exploring. But I think what really stands out to me here is the production in general. I mean, when we look at all of these tracks, they're all rather diverse. I was listening to what would be written on sheet music, devoid of the specific tones of these instruments. What kind of harmonic ideas, what kind of melodic ideas are we looking at? The drum pattern, how does that fit into everything? And honestly, this track isn't too different from everything else we have been listening to. It fits really well within their catalog. It really is just the production side of things that changes the way it feels, why it feels different from track 4 and why that felt different from 3 and from 2 and from 1. All 5 of these songs are fairly unique while still all being rock adjacent. In fact, this track in particular feels the most modern to me and is a drastic departure from the opening track. Yes, I honestly thought we were going to have something that felt a bit more dated. And while this certainly has a very 90s sound to me, it feels a bit more late 90s. I think it's the largeness of scope of all of it. It's the general size of the low end of this that makes the song feel like a massive wall of sound throughout most of this. It sounds like a bunch of stuff I would have heard on the radio. And there's been a couple of tracks on here that I've described as, even the first one felt very radio to me, but it felt radio differently. Something of the 80s. The production on it was thinner. It was less crunchy, less gritty, more, I don't know, compressed possibly. It just felt small compared to Archives of Pain, which feels massive. I thought we were going to get something that felt much older than these tracks ended up being. And a lot of that was because of the way the album opened. And that's interesting too, to evoke the sounds of different periods. But right off the start, it was impossible to deny the general atmosphere of this track that's presented to us by the way of the sounds of these instruments, the incredible sharpness and treble heavy focus on the guitar, particularly as it's sliding down some notes slowly. I think it was just a very sharp sound. Not necessarily music, not a melodic idea, but just making texture with the guitar. The production seems to be a key thing here, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a big element of who Manic Street Preachers were, at least at this point in their career. In a lot of ways, it does remind me a lot of alternative rock, both of the 90s and of the 2000s, where the sound of the song is kind of more important than, well, maybe not more important, but it creates the diversity of the album more so than the composition does. Reminds me of bands like, Seether. Every song is going to have a different sonic palette to it, different guitar tones, timbres, effects, different sizes and scopes for the song. When you listen to the notes themselves, the melodies, the chords they're using, you really don't see too much difference from track to track. It's what allows the albums to be more cohesive. But each song has a unique identity to it because its surface level vibe is so different from the other tracks on the album. And that's what I'm seeing here too. Again, when I actually listen to the melodies, when I listen to the chord progressions, there's a lot of ideas being reused, or maybe not ideas, but blueprints, concepts, musical devices being reused. There's a lot of chordal information on this, not a lot of melodic ones. The vocals are really still the only melodic instrument. We've had a couple of guitar solos, most of them not really strong in the melodic department, though the end of this one certainly had this linear drive towards the end, a nice linear movement. But a lot of it is just, here's the riff, play it over and over. Now we're going to do chords. Here's the chord, just move through the progression. The drums are pretty straightforward. But the sounds of the instruments are constantly evolving. Every song has their own sonic palette. They all have their own identity, sonic identity to them. You can just listen to the way the bass sounds. You're like, oh yeah, that's Archives of Pain. Or, oh yeah, dude, that's Yes. You don't even need to hear the lick. Someone could just set up a bass guitar with these same effects and pedals and amps and cabs and play a note, and you can know what song that came from because it's totally unique from everything else on the album. Not all alternative rock bands from the 90s and 2000s did this. There's certainly some like 3 Days Grace that kind of just have a sound. All their tracks sound fairly identical. But this was something that I did find was fairly common in, especially, well, I guess, I don't know if they were all American alternative rock bands, but certainly what I would hear on American radio in the 90s and late 90s, I guess, and early 2000s. So I find that really interesting. In lieu of rising ideas for Archives of Pain, we have arpeggiation. You rise up and then you come back down the same way, except the last note's not going to be the first note, it's going to be the first note of the next chord, the root tone for the next chord. And then from there you rise back up, come back down. We're just arpeggiating, playing notes up and down the chord. I think this is interesting because one, it is the third different way we've explored chordal writing. And two, because it does use rising ideas, kind of. I don't think it's as intentional as the rising ideas on tracks 1 and 2, but it is still there. Though, with the track called Archives of Pain, I'm curious what it could even represent here. I'm sure we'll hit that when we dive into the lyrics. This is a noisy track. In general, though, we have that cool rising idea, but it's usually accompanied with some sort of texture, screeching, scraping, all sorts of other sounds. It kind of lends itself back into this conversation of being industrial adjacent. Again, focusing on textures and tones over stylistic changes within the composition itself. But we have another song, much like She Is Suffering, that kind of focuses on a darkness, an overwhelming component, whereas She Is Suffering focuses on darkness harmony-wise. It's overwhelmingly bleak in its chord progression and chordal choice. Archives of Pain is overwhelmingly heavy in its sound. I do think it still has a generally negative vibe to it emotionally and atmospherically, but it's not the same sort of melancholic vibe we got from 4, which almost, I would say, felt kind of gothic, almost bordering on goth rock. Archives of Pain is just straightforward, angsty aggression. But it does that through the lens of these enormous tones that are generally not palatable. The guitar specifically really likes to use some wild textures, and the vocals, I think, are at their most passionate too, being delivered just absolutely belted out. I didn't say much about She Is Suffering. That was a very straightforward track, just verse, chorus, small guitar solo, and then another verse, chorus, or maybe it was just the chorus. And unlike this track, where we had so many different sounds being presented through the different sections, that one was just generally bleak and dreary in both its verse and its chorus. And the solo itself was just kind of playing some key tones from other parts. It really wasn't a strong solo in my eyes. So I just felt there was less to say about that one, other than that it was a bleak track, and I'm sure the lyrics, the title is She Is Suffering, the lyrics will probably tie into that rather well. Speaking of, let's check them out. I've been trying to figure this one out, and I feel like that is just a consistent theme today with these lyrics. At first, the opening stanza made me think of a rather interesting concept. It says, "Beauty finds refuge in herself. Beauty is such a terrible thing. She is suffering, yet more than death." The chorus says, "She is suffering. She sucks you deeper in. You exist within her shadow." And I thought about this concept of commercialized beauty. Not of natural beauty, but of beauty that is sold, particularly to women through the beauty industry. That's chasing the unrealistic standards that the beauty industry peddles, both with their ads and commercials of conventionally attractive women also wearing lots of makeup, but also just day-to-day life. Most women go out wearing makeup, even if it's just a little bit. It's part of, at least in US culture, it's just a part of how existing as a woman is typically understood. And you can even hear this, and I'm sure many women have their own stories of these. I don't. I'm not a woman, but I have heard stories like this, that the day you go to work without makeup, everyone wonders why you look so tired, exhausted, whatever. Even though you're just your normal self, you're you without makeup. And that is a non-standard visual that most people have of women in general. And I thought this track would have been about that, but I don't think it is. You see, I skipped over a line in the opening verse that is explored further in other tracks. It says, "Lovers wrapped inside each other's lies." Verse 2 kicks off, says, "Beauty is scarred into man's soul, a flower attracting lust, vice, and sin, a vine that can strangle life from a tree." When the chorus says that she sucks you in and you exist as a shadow within her, it's not talking about a woman being lost inside of beauty standards that are ever shifting. It's about a man who gets sucked into beauty and ends up, well, as verse 3, beauty poisons, her touch is leprous and pale. It's about men succumbing to lust, which I find an infinitely less interesting topic to have. Is it true? Yeah, I guess kind of. But is it interesting? And no, I don't think so. Not as much as a track that would be tackling the beauty industry and beauty standards back in the 90s. This is more of a topic that I find has been covered more frequently, maybe not necessarily musically, but at least through articles and essays within the last couple of decades. But it would have been really cool to say, oh, look, this presumably male band back in the mid-90s was talking about this too. They were observing it. And that's just not what the song is about. And the idea of just men are weak for beauty is, and then putting the onus on the beauty too, It's not that the man stupidly throws his life away because of lust. It's that the beauty attracts it. It's a vine that strangles the life from them. It sucks you deeper in. Beware of the beauty. It's just, dude, it is. And, normally, and I don't think this track is specifically misogynistic. I don't. But it does use a lot of the rhetoric of misogyny. Particularly that women will dress themselves up to trick you. That is something that is sadly still prevalent within manosphere circles of discourse. But like I said, I do find this to be infinitely less interesting than where I thought it was going based off of the opening verse and chorus. And that's just a little disappointing in and of itself. Archives of Pain is a track that, well, it loses its message a little bit in its delivery, but I think that it's impossible to deny the song is about a hatred for the glorification of murderers. Now, I say murderers specifically because in here the chorus does touch on a bunch of serial murderers. Hindley and Brady, Jeffrey Dahmer. Most of these I've never heard of. Colin Ireland, Beverly Allett, Peter Sutcliffe, maybe, otherwise known as the Yorkshire Ripper, Yoshinori Ueda. But it also brings up rulers and leaders. Vladimir Zhirinovsky, maybe that's the pronunciation of that. Jean-Marie Le Pen. It brings up Slobodan Milosevic, a Yugoslavian politician. It groups them all together. The entire chorus is just naming people, one right after another. And eventually the chorus ends with "give them the respect they deserve," repeated over and over and over. So we have this parallel, this correlation between well, I don't necessarily want to say violent. Reading some of the descriptions of these politicians, some of their legacies is violence and war crimes, but others are just brutal people in general. Not that they did anything specifically, but that they were known for really aggressive policy. So it draws that parallel, but there's also the pre-chorus, which says, "Pain, not penance. Forget the martyrs, remember the victims." As if to say that they're tired of people remembering the names of these people and not the names of the victims. Which I find a little ironic given the chorus is name-dropping all of these well-known serial murderers and aggressive/violent politicians. Not a single name of a victim is said in this entire track. As it still continues on, I don't know any of these people's victims, but I certainly know a bunch of new violent people now. I really think the chorus could have dealt without name-dropping anyone. Would it be a little more vague? Sure. But I think it'd be more relevant, too. I had to go look all of these up. But if it just, it already kind of talks at the beginning about killers in general. I don't think we needed to talk about specific ones, and that would have strengthened its pre-chorus call to action, too. Verse 2 seems to call for exceptionally violent examples to be made out of these people. It says, "Executions are needed. A bloody vessel for your peace. Tear the torso with horses and chains. Let the killer view themselves like they view the world. Don't punish less. Increase the pain. Sterilize the rapists. I preach extinction." Basically says, I want to make people afraid to become well known for violence. It is a very aggressive stance to take. but I can totally see his perspective on it too. I mean, that was one of the big things I remember of the 2010s. Maybe not so much of the 2020s, but the rise of, well, generally young white men with manifestos, sending them to the internet, posting them on message boards or whatever, and then going out and shooting up churches and schools and stuff. More and more often, I felt like I knew the names of terrorists, domestic terrorists, because their names would be mentioned ad nauseum across news websites, news channels. And Manic Street Preachers is right. 20 years prior, I don't remember any of the victims' names of these people, but I certainly remember the shooters themselves. They got all of the screen time. There was certainly a fame, an infamy, possibly, to committing these acts. And that's what this is calling out. Maybe there's a sick, twisted irony to it that we had a time where I found this happened less often. I think particularly in the West, as technology got better, it became more difficult to become a serial murderer, especially in a highly surveillance state such as the US. But the serial killers may be gone, but having a big moment in your life, you can still do that. You'll get caught that same day, but you will find that infamy, sure. And it's kind of cropped up again in a way that I feel wasn't as prevalent for about a decade and a half or so. This one might not be as nihilistic as the rest, but it's still a rather heavy track to explore lyrically. I'm going to dive into the next song called, I don't know if this is pronounced properly because I doubt this is English, but it's Revol. First 5 letters of revolution. Given the themes of this track, it wouldn't surprise me if that's what we're looking at in this song. Let's dive in, see what's going on. Yeah, another wild guitar tone.
Mr. Lenin now waken the boy. Mr. Stalin bisexually back. Khrushchev self-loving his mirrors.
We've brought back that compressed sound from the opening track. There's another situation where the emphasized beat is just a little bit away from the beat itself. And then you get that double hit, the instrument that jumps the beat, and then the instrument that lands on it. That's a cool sound and a cool rhythmic pulse. It's just very, it's almost celebratory. It's aggressively optimistic while including a fire.
I eat too much to die and not enough to stay alive. I'm sitting in the middle waiting.
Bit of a gnarly sound already, incredibly noisy and gritty. Very haunting guitar riff. Vocal delivery on this whole album is wildly stilted though. What is this? Kind of reminds me of Will Wood a little bit. It's a very different twist. An interesting mix of like pop emo and a little bit of gothy thrown in there too.
Do it, the thoughts do it too.
think that's my favorite track of the album so far. The beginning is noisy and gritty. I wasn't initially a fan of it, but I found it eventually spoke to me. The end of this is a ballad. Very emo coded in sounds, but there's a beauty in it too. It is dreary. The song seems to know that it's sad, but it finds beauty in that sadness. I think that's what makes it feel so emo. I don't think it's any particular guitar tone. I don't think it's any particular chord progression or rhythm or anything like that that stands out that makes me think of the pop emo ideas that would develop and hit the mainstream about a decade after this. But it's that feeling. It's that feeling of finding beauty in the darkness. It really makes me afraid to dive into the lyrics. I have no idea what forced sevenolb means. That title makes no sense to me. I have nothing to base this on. But it wouldn't surprise me if I found the lyrics to be vaguely emo. They have been pretty consistent with writing lyrical themes that match their musical ones. And as much as the music reminds me of stuff that came later, the lyrics also do as well. I think this would be very interesting if I kind of have a proto-pop emo song to point towards here, even if it might have been by mistake. Manic Street Preachers absolutely nails the end of this. And so let's go back to the intro that I abruptly skipped away from. I really feel like that is a sort of, it's a veil. Maybe it's the way the world seems when not through the perspective at the end. Maybe it's the way someone feels about themselves when seen through a perspective that isn't their own. Maybe it's an old perspective. It feels gritty and dark and oppressive. It is a gnarly opening to a track. How do you pair that with beauty at the end? With something that is so focused on creating consonants? Dreary, melancholic consonants, but consonants nonetheless. I really do feel like this is going to be a track that is about removing a mask or a veil. Maybe an exterior focus that is drastically different from an interior. Maybe it's the way you present yourself to fit in that doesn't feel quite right, and your inside who you are feels incredibly natural to you. I don't know, but this contrast works narratively. The beginning grew on me as the ballad went on. And I found that I was really gravitating towards this narrative that they're building here, musically anyways. Lyrically, I didn't pick up much of anything because I kind of dropped this idea in the reaction, but the more that I listened to it, the more I started thinking about the other tracks. The vocal delivery is ridiculous on this album. I haven't really picked up many lines at all, and I think a reason for that is the incredibly stilted rhythmic element in the lyrics. I'm probably going to go back and play parts of this track while I read the lyrics here to see how this works, but whenever I listen to what the lyrics are doing, first thing I do is, hey, what kind of words are you saying? And I can't really tell because the emphasis is never on the right syllable. But there's also what feels like weird pauses in the middle of words, maybe. At least the first syllable I hear doesn't sound like a word, and then there'll be a 1-beat pause or 2-beat pause, and then the next syllable comes in, and it doesn't really sound like a word either. So either his accent is incredibly too thick for me to understand, which I don't think is the case. There was one part in here which was a little closer to like a sing-songy spoken word thing that I could understand. Or this is one word with a massive gap in the middle of the 2 syllables, which is bonkers. But I also think about the way that these are phrased, and when we rush through syllables at some parts and then drag others out, and it doesn't really seem to have much fluidity to it. Musically, when I listen to a guitar, there are some times when like the guitar and the vocals are playing a similar melody, maybe not identical, but close enough. The idea sounds rhythmically fine. Sure, it's a little jagged and syncopated, but it sounds fine on the guitar. But it sounds really weird when words are paired with it. And the more that I listen to the vocalist, I just keep thinking, dude, this is a really weird way to divide up these sentences. And I feel like as I think back to older tracks, that's a fairly consistent element to their music. Just uniquely syncopated vocal lines. Not as far as the melody goes from a musical standpoint, but the words and the poetry of it just sound odd. I don't even know the words he's saying, and yet it sounds odd. It's like the opposite of a vocalist who might still be singing gibberish, but it just flows right. A band that comes to mind for this would be Gong. Sometimes their words are just Dr. Seuss gibberish, but you know what? It sounds phenomenal in the moment. This is like the polar opposite of that, where even though I still can't understand him, it just doesn't feel right. Rhythmically, it's just wrong in every way. And I find that to be rather unique too. There's certainly lyricists out there who write awkward things, but usually the phrasing is like a one-off thing. They tried to cram too many words in, but they didn't find a way to shorten it, so they just left it a bit awkwardly stilted at this moment. I don't think I've ever heard a lyricist write something so consistently awkward. And that's starting to stand out to me as we come into the midpoint of this album. It's just wild. I don't have much to add to Revol. It's barely 3 minutes of a track, and most of it just, the word I was looking for earlier was anthemic. It is a call to arms of a sort. There's elements of victory, but there's still a fire underneath. It's quasi-celebratory, but knows the job isn't done. That's what the chorus feels like to me, and the verse is mostly a point of tension to push against that. So we have a nice back and forth, a cyclical component to it, but it's a fairly straightforward song, which I'm starting to see a pattern here. Walking Abortion was more straightforward, or was more complex. She Is Suffering was straightforward. Archives of Pain was more complex. Revol was straightforward. Forced Seventh is more complex. I'm expecting track 8, Mausoleum, to be a bit more standardized. Although after that, we have quite a few tracks on the shorter side, back to back to back to back to back. So maybe we're going to find some more standard ideas in the back half of this album. Let's hit some lyrics on these two, find out what's going on there. Revol is a bit of an odd track lyrically. The chorus just says revel, 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 and then it introduces some German before wrapping up on some Italian. It is pointed out that revel is lover in reverse, which I suppose is kind of clever, but we'll get to that in a second. The German parts, it translates to living space, culture war, out, out. And then the Italian word fila, which could mean a queue or to run away. Not really sure about all of this. Culture struggle is interesting, though. Culture Kampf. It was apparently an idea of creating divisions within culture between people. and is at least seemingly analogous to culture war, which should seem pretty familiar to anyone alive right now, especially if you've been paying attention to, well, seemingly particularly Western cultures and Western politics. Now, why we shifted to to German and Italian, I don't know. There is a hypothesis on Genius that it's supposed to be drawing parallels to fascism, which I guess they think is just Italian and German. I mean, yes, we do have Mussolini and Hitler, but I don't know. It feels like a bit of grasping at straws there. Now, the revel lover thing comes into play when we look at the verses, which tend to look at a totalitarian or fascistic dictator, and then a phrase that has nothing to do with them, it seems, that always revolves around love and relationships. Let's just look at the first verse. Mr. Lenin, awaken the boy. Mr. Stalin, bisexual epoch. Khrushchev, self-love in his mirrors. Brezhnev, married into group sex. Gorbachev, celibate self-importance. Yeltsin, failure is his own impotence. I don't know much about these characters, these people in depth. I'm generally aware of some of them, at least. Not all of them, but verse 2 goes through even more. We bring up Napoleon and Chamberlain and Trotsky. Che Guevara, interestingly, gets pulled into this as well. And they're all paired with a random phrase that, again, I don't see much of a parallel here. Looking at the annotations on Genius, it seems that even people who are more well-versed in these people, in these historical figures, don't see a parallel between the person and the phrase next to them. There has been a quote by Richie Edwards, one of the members of the band, says that the theme of this track is about failure. All leaders of men have failed, and all love fails. If men of the caliber of Lenin and Trotsky failed, then how can anyone expect anything to change? End quote. I don't know. I don't see the point of this track. It's a really strange parallel to draw. I'm not sure how we should be reading. I mean, I don't get it, dude. I'm just going to leave it at that. We're going to move on. So I kind of had track 7 right, but also very wrong. I got the right gist, but interpreted it incorrectly. The track actually stands for 4 stone and 7 pounds. That's what the title means, which is roughly just over 60 pounds in weight, which is a ridiculously low number. And the track is about anorexia. The opening is a sample that says, I eat too much to die and not enough to stay alive. I'm sitting in the middle, waiting. This comes from a documentary about anorexia from 1994 called Caroline's Story. Most of this track is about watching the body fade away. Cheeks sunken and despaired. So gorgeous, I finally sunk to 6 stone. I see my third rib appear. A week later, all my flesh disappears. Stretched it taut, cling firm on bone. Verse 2, my stomach collapsed at 5 stone. Naked and lovely at 5 stone 2, my vision's getting blurred, but I can see my ribs and I feel fine. My hands are trembling stalks. My mother tries to choke me with roast beef. My father says this is just the way I'm built, but I can change that. My cocoon sheds. The chorus is about what they hope to achieve out of this. The chorus says, I want to walk in the snow and not leave a footprint to not soil its purity. This person is dwindling away, and all they can see is the beauty of it. That's what I missed. The perspective of the narrator is beauty, but the perspective from the outside looking in is one of horror. And to be fair, the narrator understands this too. In the outro, it says, I don't mind the horror that surrounds me. Self-worth scatters and self-esteem is a bore. I've moved to a higher plateau. This is a discipline that is so rare, so please applaud me. Beautiful dignity found in self-abuse. It's about wasting away, not giving your body enough nutrients and energy to survive. Yeah, it's a heavy track lyrically. I also did listen to the vocalist delivery on that one a little bit, and it is wildly stilted, but I think that was the worst song to do that to, because while reading the words, I kind of forgot about listening to the delivery because I got so enraptured in this depressing tale. So moving on, the next track is called Mausoleum. Don't know why I put so much emphasis on the S there, but just pretend I didn't. Let's dive in. This whole song's just like fixated on one idea.
Rub the human face in its own vomit and then force it to look in the mirror.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to this one. Each of these segments is just focusing on one thing. A lot of this just feels like you do have that accelerando, but every single track was just like one note, one chord all the way through. A wild shift too from track 7, which I feel to be the emotional peak of the album so far. That's treble heavy. Rare moments of uplift in their music, lately anyways. Coming off of the gritty melancholy of track 7 into these almost no wave tracks 8 and 9. This is wild. Very syncopated on this one too. Just that constant hit. Just so fun. I almost hate it for being so fun. I'm going to extend this comparison out there. It may seem unorthodox and maybe even a little rude, but that song almost feels like it could have appeared on My Chemical Romance's fourth album, Danger Days, which, if you haven't heard, is a pretty stark departure from what you probably think My Chemical Romance makes. If you're only familiar with their more emo-sided things, both of, their first two albums, but also The Black Parade, which was not necessarily an emo album, but definitely a bit drearier in thematic topics, Danger Days was a pretty big departure. To me, it almost feels like a different band in some ways, but there's a lot of elements in there that are just very much still My Chemical Romance. This track almost feels like it would fit in there perfectly. Everything down to rhythmic cadences, energy, chord usage, and even vocal delivery. There's several parts of this vocalist that I would not be surprised if Gerard Way were influenced by or had listened to prior to starting the band. And that makes it a really interesting departure for me in this album. I mentioned that it's so bright and maybe even positive. For my note, I wrote fun and upbeats. That's certainly a descriptor of parts of this album, but as a whole, I would not really call this an upbeat album. This sort of feels like it takes some of the energy from track 6's Revel and pushes it even further, particularly in the chorus. Mausoleum and Faster back to back is a wild series of tracks to place after 4 Stone and 7 Pounds. Now, I'm going to be completely honest. I don't know what you could do after that track that wouldn't seem like Whiplash. In a lot of ways, at least to me, it feels like an album closer, both its slight departure by going more for this beautiful ballad finale, but also because everything else in here is anger. Anger at systems that be. There's a lot of anti-fascist talk in here. There is anger against murderers and violence in general. There's a lot of societal and political anger in this album. And then there's something incredibly, almost personal in 4 Stone and 7 Pounds. It feels smaller in scope, and through that lens, I think more cohesively developed than anything else on this album. And then we just return back to what we've been doing. To me, that doesn't feel right. You have emotionally drained me and then thrust me back into all of this high energy stuff. I'm going to be honest, personally, I'm not here for this anymore. I found the beginning of Mausoleum to be incredibly jarring and the track comparatively a fair bit boring. Mausoleum is just incredibly single-minded. The verse has one riff. The chorus is just one tone over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And then the post-chorus maybe, or a bridge, has a little bit of movement to it, but it's still a short idea repeated and repeated. That doesn't work for me. This album has been heavy in topic, but generally light-ish in tone. They go for a heavy tone and then just go back as if nothing happened. That doesn't work for me. Track 7 made me emotionally hollow. I'm not ready for Revolution again. And I don't know how to continue this album if this is what it's going to be at this moment. It almost feels more correct for me to take an hour or two break and then listen to the last 4 tracks in a semi-refreshed mental state. 7 either should have been something separate, a B-side, a single, or it should have wrapped the album up if this is what we're doing. I don't know, dude. I mean, and beyond that too, like even outside of track 7, what do I say about these 2 tracks? 8 has 3 riffs that are all based around little 1.5-second licks, and you just hear that a lot. It is highly repetitious. I hope the lyrics lean into this repetition, because while this album has focused on shorter, repeating ideas, I kind of mentioned this within the first couple of tracks, that the riffage in here really isn't its strong suit. It's a lot of chordal information, creating atmosphere and texture. This Mausoleum is probably the worst offender for highly repetitive composition. And yeah, I'm gonna throw it out there. It's not an interesting song to me. Now, some of that might be bias coming off of track 7. I am completely willing to entertain that idea, but I have no analysis for that song other than single-minded, and I hope the lyrics lean into that because it's the only thing I took out of it. Faster is upbeat and fun and very punky. It's got a youthful exuberance to it. It still has super focused ideas. A lot of the riffs are just 2 notes and kind of bouncing between them. It's very syncopated, very fun, very bouncy, very light. There's a little bit of edge. It's that rock bite, but it's not an aggressive track like we've heard before, like tracks 5, Archives of Pain, or even the first half of 4 Stone 7 Pounds. It is a generally fun, digestible song with some super catchy rhythmic devices in it and an incredibly infectious theatric vocal delivery. I'm not emotionally here for this. What do I say about it? It's just fun. It's upbeat. It made me laugh a couple of times. A little short chuckles. Once was just out of, contrast. Are you serious? This is what you're doing next? But there also are some comical ideas in it. The entire rhythmic devices within Faster are just weird in almost absurd ways. It is catchy, sure, but it's sort of also super obtuse. I don't have anything to add to these tracks. They did what they did, and there was a solo, I think, in Faster, track 9, the second one we listened to in that group. It kind of came and went, like much of these solos do. I think that's something that, was it Revel? No, I think it was Archives of Pain. We saw a guitar solo that actually entered into melodic writing and linear writing and really taking its time to build into something rather than to fill out space between choruses. Faster is just the filling out space type of solo there. Very functional more than anything else. Maybe the lyrics are going to hit harder, but I mean, dude, coming off of 7, these feel like child's play. Imagine if a film just like, it's light, kind of, it's got some deeper meaning to it, but it's fairly lighthearted. And then like there's a death. There hasn't really been much blood in the movie, but now someone's died. And you're like, oh wow, it's kind of crazy. And then they're cracking jokes the next second. Like, this is the marvelization of music. Years, decades before the MCU really made it popular to mix drama and comedy and to undercut dramatic important moments with comedic one-liners. That's what this feels like, and it's just tonal whiplash in the most self-defeating way. I'm very passionate about this. I don't know why. I think it's just because like track 7 I really connected with, and I'm just not. I've lost that connection now. I don't know, but I really don't know how to continue on from here. I don't want to start the next track if it's just going to be more like the rest of this album. In the meantime, let's hit some lyrics. Mausoleum is actually really strong lyrically. I kind of wish it had been paired with some other music, though I think I understand the intention of it. We'll get to that in a second. It is basically about how humanity has destroyed humanity. The planet Earth has become a mausoleum itself. The first verse says, "Wherever you go, I will be carcass. Whatever you see will be rotting flesh. Humanity recovered, glittering etiquette, answers her crimes with mausoleum rent." This idea that in the wake of humanity, all we have is bodies. The world becoming a tomb for our past endeavors. The chorus didn't make any sense to me. It simply says, "No birds, the sky is swollen black, holy mass of dead insects." The "no birds" part is actually a reference to them visiting the Peace Museum in Hiroshima. And Nicky Wire, one of the members of the band, mentioned that there's no grass there. You don't see worms or even birds. I don't know how accurate that is, but that was his experience. And to return to a place of such death and destruction of humans by humans. The chorus says that the sky is swollen black. There is such sadness, such sorrow around this place. And then it finishes this up with holy mass of dead insects. Now, this I didn't know about, but it's kind of interesting. The Mass for Dead Insects is a rite performed on the day after the harvest festival when farmers would make rice dumplings as an offering to the souls of the deceased insects that had inadvertently trodden on as they worked in the fields. I find that to be really interesting, just as a concept in and of itself, that it's almost impossible to exist without taking life. Most people will probably not murder another human, but insects? Single-cell organisms? Yeah, we probably kill lots of things every single day. Here is an acknowledgement of that, trying to make peace with this destruction. But in the wake of pairing it next to their description of the museum at Hiroshima, a mass of dead insects is a very interesting way to frame an atomic bomb. Because honestly, in the scope of the explosion, humans are kind of insects. The destruction is so cataclysmically beyond thought, really. In a lot of ways, it's beyond the scope of one human life. It's so difficult to understand it. It's almost as if the power of a god struck down an entire area. And somehow other humans are the ones who wielded this power. This chorus, not really saying much, requiring context to understand, is incredibly powerful nonetheless. Verse 2 says, "I come and walk down memory lane. No one sees a thing, but they can pretend. Life, eternal scorched grass, and the trees. For your love, nature has hemorrhaged." Our history as a race is destruction of us, of the inhabitants of this planet, of the planet itself. Nature hemorrhages due to our actions. This is probably the most misanthropic track on this album. I think it pairs well with some of the other tracks that kind of focus on how little power some of us actually have in the wake of those who control the world. but it's still, I think this album as a whole puts this weight on every single person's shoulder alive. That as a race, for millions of years, we have done nothing but destroy. And it's only gotten worse as we've advanced our weapons. Lyrically, this is incredible. Musically, I don't know, man. The track is single-minded, and maybe the high repetition and single-minded focus of the track is supposed to represent the cycles of violence through humans' history. Maybe the simplicity of the music is also supposed to be exemplifying the simplicity of violence. It is one of our baser instincts. It is very simple to conceptualize and to identify. It is very different from love and empathy, which are more complex ideas. Violence shows up in almost everyone. Almost most people can be pushed to a violent act. Maybe not killing someone, but rage makes violent acts possible really easily. But empathy is something that some people literally will never feel in their life. I think by definition, that makes it more complex, and a song that is focused entirely on history of violence of an entire race of people, focusing on short, simple ideas is a really great way to convey that. But I think on the casual listening side of things, it doesn't really make for an interesting track. It is artistically strong, but not really fun to listen to, and maybe a song about violence shouldn't be fun to listen to. But something about this still doesn't quite work for me. The topic doesn't fit well with the music. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this one? As I'm reading the lyrics to Faster, something in it clicked. It's a part of the pre-chorus that says, "Self-disgust is self-obsession, honey, and I do as I please." And that seemed really familiar to me. And at first I thought maybe it was a Will Wood line because it kind of feels like something he would say. But I went and looked anyways. And I have done a reaction to this track right here. It's the only Manic Street Preachers single song reaction that I've done so far. And it was back in August of 2025. So almost a year ago. We're a month off, but it's close to a year ago. And I find it really interesting. I called it a pop punk anthem at the time. And I still kind of feel that way, thinking back on the music, but it's interesting to see just how different I feel about it here in the context of the album versus how I felt about it then in isolation. And I had mentioned not too long ago that I wonder how I would have approached these two tracks without having Four Stone played before them. And come to find out, at least one of them, I had that opportunity. I was quite a bit more positive about this track last year. So this is just a really great showcasing in biases and mental state and how things outside of the context of a work can absolutely influence your understanding and reception to a work. And I think that's just kind of obvious. I think most of us have looked at a painting or listened to a song or read a book or watched a movie and it just completely bounced off of us. And then you try it again a few months later and you're like, oh, dang, what was I thinking last time? You might have just not been in the right headspace for it. And I think that's what happened here, except my headspace has been altered by the album itself this time, which is really interesting. As for the lyrics themselves, it's about someone who feels like an outsider to society and basically says that's okay. The opening verse says, "I'm an architect, but they call me a butcher." So I build things, but they tell me I destroy them. I'm a pioneer, but they call me primitive. I'm looking towards the future, but they tell me I'm still in the past. Says I'm purity, but they call me perverted. The chorus says I'm stronger than Mensa, which is just a hilarious line. Mensa is an academy for education or intelligence, something along those lines. It's mental strength, knowledge, and information. Being stronger than Mensa is an interesting line. Usually you would say you're smarter than Mensa. Here he says he's stronger. Says I'm all the things that you regret. I think that's an interesting line too, because as we'll see going forward, he talks about how people twist and contort themselves to fit in. He doesn't. People might regret trying to fit in rather than being themselves. And he says, I am what you regret, what you wish you could be, but you don't. The pre-chorus says, and I love this line, if you stand up like a nail, you will be knocked down. I've been too honest with myself. I should have lied like everyone else. That's an interesting line right there. His honesty, his ability to be himself is what makes him stand out. I wonder why he thinks back on that. This runs really well into the outro, which says it's so damn easy to cave in. Man kills everything, which I don't think stood out to me as much last time we checked this track out as it does now, given how much death and destruction is on my mind. This is an album about violence. It hyper focuses on the ways that humanity has kneecapped themselves. Bringing violence into the conversation of culture and manipulating oneself to fit into a culture is really interesting, because it feels kind of out of place with everything else. But here it's about the death of the self. It's not an exterior force, it's an interior force. You choose to stop being something you are in order to be something else. You have killed part of yourself in order to assimilate. It says it's so easy to just cave in. Standing out is actually kind of difficult. We're really good at killing off things. What's killing off a part of ourself? And I think that's really powerful, coming off of the themes of this album up to this point. I still think this is a pretty strong pop punk anthem, or pop rock anthem, either way. Even after all this time, it still works. All right. 4 more tracks to go here. This next one is called This Is Yesterday. Let's dive in. Another track that, well, harmonically, but also production-wise, seems to be looking towards the past.
Do not listen to what I say. Just listen to what I can. Keep silent. The only way to
The bass just holding down that pedal tone.
is by exploiting the very thing that cheapens me.
It's a fun little guitar lick. It's also a rather quiet track. Those bars on the left are very rarely maxing out. It's a lower energy track. It's a weird effect on the vocals too. like a little phaser thing going on. I don't know.
As it says runes and gadgets reads, why do anything when you can't forget everything?
I feel like the production on the guitars kind of betrays some of the melodic ideas.
And I stare at the sky, and it leaves me blind.
I will say though, there's a wistfulness to this. I think earlier I had mentioned the word somber, but I don't think that's accurate.
Close my eyes, and this is yesterday.
I thought we were going to continue the solo.
At the sky,
I do like the melodic nature of that solo. Short-lived though.
I close my eyes, and this is yesterday.
I think the pattern continues though. This one was more static in nature, kind of carrying this wistfulness throughout the entirety of the track. Again, I don't really have a lot to add to it. Ooh. An interesting tone. Is that a keyboard? But also an interesting harmonic palette too.
Scratch my leg where the rusty nail. Sadly, it heals. Color my hair, but the dark goes out. I can't seem to stay fixated.
Ooh. First falsetto of the album?
Shut up and shine my dim. Clean and so serene. See myself without broken lines. Old age, growing stacks and a
Yeah, opening up the middle section, pushing the vocals out, but then filling it in with the guitar right here. Yeah, classic alternative rock sounds. Lots of songs did this back in the 90s. The bass is so big. Little Phrygian thrown in there on the guitar. I was going to mention how we were coming up on time, and this was either going to transition into the next track or be abrupt, and ended up being a rather abrupt finale. And I think it's the only time we have that on the album. For that abrupt ending to be the words "I want to die" adds a lot of weight to that. It is a decision not done in accordance to anything larger than the song itself. I mean, some decisions in music making are like, oh, that's just the kind of music they make. You know, a metal band making metal music, being loud and aggressive. Yeah, sometimes that'll line up with the lyrics. Sometimes it won't, but they're a metal band. They're going to be loud and aggressive. And, you know, we've had ideas that have been presented across this entire album that are just very Manic Street Preacher. Their endings have consistently been a bit drawn out. Not too many of them just stop abruptly at the final syllable of the final vocal line. This one does. That makes it stand out. It feels intentional. It breaks a pattern. For it to be those words, it feels incredibly intentional. Other than that, though, I don't know that I have much to add to this track either. This Is Yesterday is incredibly wistful. It is lower tempo, lower energy. It just kind of gets through it. There is a bittersweet element to it. I think as far as positive versus negative emotions, we've had a lot of elation in here, but we really haven't had a lot of beauty. And I think that's where this track sits. The bittersweet component is remembering the good times, and also the negativity, you know, the bitter part of the bittersweet is remembering that those times are in the past. Maybe they won't come again. Maybe you don't have optimism for the future. Maybe it's looking at your childhood naivety versus your jaded adulthood. Who knows? It's this schism of the positive and the negative smashing together, creating this bittersweet vibe of wistfulness, wanting for something you don't have. With the title, This Is Yesterday, it's, to me at least, kind of pointing towards a wanting of the past. The lyrics may expand on that, though, but it is probably the slowest track on the album so far. Four Stone had a ballad at the end of it. This is a pure ballad from start to finish. And bringing that into the finale of this album, I mean, there's only 12 minutes left after This Is Yesterday. That makes sense. I'm curious to see where track 12 goes, since it is the penultimate song. But I think this is a good place right here, like the 60-70% mark. We're 2/3 done with this, to kind of put their ballad in here. And now I'm questioning why I'm fine with this going into Die in the Summertime, where I wasn't cool with Four Stones going into Mausoleum. And again, I really think it's just emotional connectivity, but I have to interrogate that side of myself too. Why does this work and the other doesn't? I don't always have an answer for that. You know, sometimes it's just in your gut. It's the way you react to it. You listen to two songs, and you're like, yeah, that's cool. You listen to two other songs, you're like, yeah, dude, I don't know, that ain't working. And they're kind of doing the same thing, but you were different about it. I don't know, but it is not lost on me that going from a ballad into a higher energy rocky track, it didn't really faze me this time around where it did halfway into this album. Die in the Summertime, like I said, it's just kind of a straightforward rocky track. We have this really cool phaser thing going on the guitars. We bring in a slightly Phrygian sound. It's a very interesting harmonic component to the beginning of this track. We go full Phrygian in the solo section. I wonder then if the opening is in some sort of pentatonic Phrygian, which is why it doesn't feel like the full Phrygian style, because it's only 5 of the notes of the chord. A lot of rock and metal likes to deal with pentatonic. It leaves open space to kind of take this core idea and expand it in a lot of different ways without really clashing. And then when we head into the solo, as solos typically do in rock and metal, we enter a more fleshed out form of the harmonic palette. And maybe that's just a full traditional dominant Phrygian there. That would be my gut, though. I'm not super good. Super good. That's just great grammar right there. I don't always have a good ear for chordal and harmonic stuff. I can feel it out, I can suss it out, but I don't always, I can't listen to it and say, oh, that's, a B7th or something like that. My ear training just isn't up to that. But Phrygian is a sound that always pops out to me. Dominant Phrygian is one of my favorite modes, and I can usually hear that. But I'm kind of guessing about the pentatonic Phrygian idea at the beginning of this track. But it would explain why we kind of got little spices, little doses, little sprinkling of that at the beginning, and then got the full sound in the solo section. But aside from the solo, which was melodic and I wish just kind of went more for it, it felt like it got stripped of its expansion. When it was starting to get good, it got cut off and we went into the chorus. Aside from that, the rest of the track is just sort of a straightforward song. Something about this reminds me of, I don't know, Stone Temple Pilots or something. I don't think that's the right band, but there is some 90s band that, I don't know, it feels like this. It's the way the guitar tones are. It's the focus on two notes kind of bouncing between them in the riffage. It's the vocal delivery, the projection of it, the roundness of the vocal tone. I don't think it's Stone Temple Pilots. Maybe it is. But this has reminded me of another band of its time, a contemporary to Manic Street Preachers. And I find this to be the most radio rock track of the album so far. A lot of this, I think, maybe not lyrically, but musically, probably would have fit into the radio over here in the US. And I'm sure other places too, but, I never listened to the radio in the 90s in anywhere in Europe, so I don't know. But I feel like this is the one that is the most radio friendly, the most that just fits in with my ideas. Because I listened to a lot of local radio stations in the 90s, early 2000s. I mean, in 03, I got my car and I certainly put on the local rock station quite a bit because I didn't have anything else. I don't think my car had a CD player. I think it was tape only. And I listened to the radio, man. That's all I had. It'd be a few years off before I put a CD player in there. And actually, I think it was a different car. I don't think that car ever got a CD player. And then I started getting CDs and listening to what I wanted. That was kind of the last time I listened to radio. But early 2000s, late 90s, I listened to a lot of the singles. The stuff that, every radio station was playing, the big rock bands that are always headlining the festivals. A lot of the mainstream stuff. And this feels like it would have fit right and just perfectly slotted in with everything else happening at the time. There is one thing I want to bring up, though. Here, I think, is a good time as we enter into presumably the final listening session of this video, though the next track is 6 minutes and I may want to give it its own dedicated analysis segment and do the final track, as short as it is, also alone. But a lot of this album has been about violence. We kicked it off with sexual violence. We kicked it off with dehumanization, depersonalization, stripping the humanity from a person. This was more, it was a larger topic as a whole, but it was also told through the viewpoints of a single narrator too. From here, we've explored all sorts of ideas, the scale growing and shrinking. Mausoleum is the entire world. It's the history of humanity. Four Stone is a single person destroying their body. We've looked at tracks that explore the violence of other people. We've explored control. Actually, that's really interesting too. Something like Revol, while not necessarily directly referencing it, does mostly point towards dictators and fascists and authoritarians, them controlling people. Right after that, we listened to Four Stone, which is a person controlling themselves. I think I skipped that line because it wasn't as important to the angle that I wanted to read that track in, but let me pull this up real quick. Where was this line? Oh, it might have been in the outro. It says, I'm too weak to fuss and too weak to die. Choice is skeletal in everybody's life. I choose my choice. I starve to frenzy. Then calls it later, as I mentioned, a discipline that's so rare. It really is about controlling something, even if it just is yourself. I hadn't pieced that together, but I find it interesting that that track does come after Revel, which is about one person trying to control massive groups of people. So we have control, we have violence, we have dehumanization, we have the history and cycles of violence throughout all of humanity. It has been a rather violent album, thematically at least. But I also pieced this together while listening to Die in the Summertime of just how distorted the guitar tone was, so much warble and stuff. And I talked about earlier, I don't remember if it was She Is Suffering or Archives of Pain, but about how the movement of the guitar tone and the bass tone felt like writhing walls, like flesh walls that were just moving with the song. And the more I start to think about this, I think about the guitars through this entire track. I thought about the semi-phaser thing going on the vocals for This Is Yesterday, which felt kind of odd to me. And I wrote down this phrase, sonic destruction. So much of this album has been taking an electric guitar tone and just warping and distorting and perverting this sound into all sorts of other tones and ideas, sonic ideas. The landscape of this album is constantly in flux. There might be a couple of different electric guitar bodies that are used across this album, but the end result is mostly through effects pedals, amps, cabs, microphones, and then whatever sort of effects might be put on later in the engineering side of things. It's about taking that original sound and manipulating it, forcing it to be something it wasn't originally. And in a lot of times, creating a destructive sound. I've talked about sharp textures across this album, buzzing, fuzziness. I mean, we're talking about overdrive, which is destruction of sound. Anytime that clipping is introduced, which Overdrive does a phenomenal job of introducing clipping, you're actually removing characteristic of the sound quality itself and flattening out the idea, flattening out the sound wave. And that is pure destruction of sound. From top to bottom, aside from maybe atmosphere, because some of these atmospheres are still kind of like poppy rock ideas, which is wild to think about giving the themes, but the sounds of this album and the lyrics of this album are consistently about destruction. It may just be a quality of its era. As I mentioned, alternative rock, lots of bands have played around with this idea of not really changing your composition up much, but certainly changing your sonic palette up. Manic Street Preachers could very well just be in conversation with their peers. But I think within the themes of this album, sonic destruction is really important and a vital element of understanding what this album is trying to say in its totality. Let's hit some lyrics. This Is Yesterday is a melancholic look at the joys and naivety of childhood. From our narrator's perspective, this was the best time of their life, and things just aren't as great as they used to be. They look back on their childhood with fondness. It says that looking back, someone we'll take care of you. But today I repent. Everything is falling apart. Houses as ruins and gardens as weeds. The fact that their life is metaphorically in shambles. Maybe they just feel this on the inside. Maybe they don't know the right step to go forward. Regardless, things are dilapidated now in their life. Everything is warmer in the past. There's also this line that I can't say I'm too fond of, but it wraps up the second verse. It says, "Why do anything when you can forget everything?" I can kind of see the perspective on this, whether it's just the infallibility of memory, the fact that we don't get to remember what we remember, or we don't get to choose what we remember. Sometimes we will remember the most mundane things in perfect clarity, but the aspects of our life we really would want to remember in pristine detail are the ones that we completely forget or are fuzzy. There's also memory loss, brain damage, and ultimately death, which removes all memory. I can see this nihilistic perspective, but I'm not sure if I agree with it. And I wonder too if it's just part of the exaggerated nature of the album. This is an album that's rather nihilistic and misanthropic and apocalyptic, has a completely negative view on the human race as a whole, without any sheds of light for a positive perspective. I don't necessarily think the lyricists believe this in totality, but this is an album for them to solidify and compress all of their grievances down into a single work. And it does end up feeling nihilistic because of that. And I think that's where this sentence comes into play. It's hyperbolic, but certainly something that the lyricist has sort of thought at times. Not necessarily an untruth, but not a truth either. The chorus says, "I stare at the sky and it leaves me blind. So I close my eyes and this is yesterday." And I think that is a poignant way of describing how time can feel, particularly as you get a bit older. I don't know how old Manic Street Preachers were when they created this album. I haven't really felt this way until I was my early 30s, and then time just flew. Somehow I am almost into my 40s now, and I'm not really sure where the last decade went. My 20s were not like this at all. But time being fleeting is something that this chorus captures very easily. You try to look at something, you lose the opportunity, and now it's just a memory. I feel that. Die in the Summertime is, well, a really nice companion track to This Is Yesterday. If that is a track that says today is worse than yesterday was, where yesterday could be any time of the past, that things are just getting worse as we progress, and that, well, as the song itself professes, their best remembered times are when they were a child. This song is about not wanting to age, because with age comes jadedness, comes anger, comes worse living conditions. The world just seems to progress in a downward spiral with every year. What's the point of going forward? The first verse says, "I color my hair, but the dye grows out. I can't seem to stay a fixed ideal. Childhood pictures redeem. They're clean and so serene. I can see myself without ruining lines. Whole days throwing sticks into streams." Talking about the simplicity of childhood once again, the joys of it, just running out into the woods and throwing sticks into water. Like, that's what made life worth living as a kid. Very different from the hustle and bustle of trying to make sure your rent's paid. And I'm sure as an artist, he has obligations to the record label and all sorts of stuff, signings and touring and all of this. It's probably a fairly busy life, and the simplicity of childhood is certainly alluring to that. But he also sees himself getting old too. His hair grows. He has ruining lines on his body. The general way that skin ages. He's starting to see some of that in his own face, but maybe more importantly on his hands. I have found that as I've gotten older, I don't know that I necessarily look almost 40 in my face anyways. I certainly think I look in my 30s, but some people have told me I look younger. I don't believe them, mind you. But I even get those comments here sometimes where people are like, "You're still in your youth, man." I'm like, "Bro, I'm approaching midlife. I'm a middle-aged man almost." But certainly looking at the hands, and it's just it really reminds me of my age. Just all of the wrinkles of the hand. I've come to find that this is probably the best way to gauge someone's age because you can use makeup and Botox and plastic surgery and all sorts of things to adjust the face, but very few people think about the hands. And I think it tends to give away people's age more than they think it does. And I certainly feel that myself. And when I'm in my pensive moments, and I look at my hands and I just, 40 years, dude. So I can understand seeing myself without ruined lines. I don't know if I necessarily relate to wrinkles as ruining lines, but if you're aiming for a fixed ideal, as he states, wanting to keep the pristine element of unstretched skin, of keeping that perfect facade of youthfulness, yeah, I guess wrinkles would ruin that. The chorus says, "I've crawled so far. I recognize the dim traces of creation, and I want to die in the summertime." I think summertime being that of blooming, of blossoming, of peak season, depending on where you're at. Summertime absolutely sucks down here in Florida, but some places that are cold year round, summer is just a great time to go out and actually have an environment you can do stuff in. It's also generally bright versus winter's dreariness. We typically don't talk about seasonal depression in the summer. It is one that feels bright and youthful, exuberant. I think summertime as a parallel for youth makes sense and parallels his ideas of wanting to stay a fixed ideal rather well. And so I think that's what this track is ultimately about. Finding the process of aging, of passing through time, scary in the fact that the world just kind of continues to suck from their worldview and it gets worse with each passing year, but also not wanting yourself to drift down that angle too. Maybe they have family members who have had issues going into their older life and they don't want to deal with any of that. Maybe they're not a big fan of adulthood in general. The whole responsibility angle of being part of a band is starting to drain on them. They just want the youthful fun. For whatever reason, death around 1995, seemed right to them. I think it's interesting that I just got done talking about hyperbole, because I do believe this is probably hyperbolic in some sense. It feels theatric, absolutely. The same type of theater that I so well knew as an emo kid in high school were the smallest things, were the most dramatic and important things in my life. Getting old, being afraid of that, and making a song about wanting to die while you're still young feels incredibly emo. But take away the hyperbole and you get the fear of growing up, the fear of aging, of progressing into a world that feels ever darker ahead of you. And I get that. I think that's a really strong notion in here, especially for the nihilistic views of the album. There are certainly some albums out there that we have listened to that say things are bleak, but we can fight back. This is an album that says things are bleak and history says it will get bleaker. And if that is the worldview of the lyricist or of the narrator, again, I don't want to ascribe thoughts to any specific people, then it's understandable of not wanting to take a step into a darker future when the present is dark enough already. The penultimate track here is called The Intense Humming of Evil, just over 6 minutes long. Let's see what's going on here.
The court has come. The court of the nations. And into the courtroom will come the martyrs of Majdanek and Oswiecim.
It's a fairly quiet, compressed sample here. It just feels older in general. The orchestral bit is interesting. I wonder if that's part of the sample or if they wrote this for it.
No pity on them. Now the victims will judge the butchers. Today the tear of the child is the judge. The grief of the mother is the prosecutor.
Funny, I mentioned industrial music earlier. This certainly feels in line with that. Another just cringy, disgusting track. The 3 or 4 tracks on this album that just have filthy atmospheres. Particularly this one reminds me of what 9 Inch Nails would be doing a little later. I like the drumming on this. Tom heavy, muted, lower end focus.
but you're no different. Wish the world gets back to a machine.
Okay. Not really a 6-minute song then. The first minute and 5 seconds is one musical idea. It's mostly the industrial stuff. And a 1-minute sample, some spoken word stuff. The song itself starts about a minute in, but we continue on with that industrial sound, introducing the guitar and the bass and the drums. The vocals don't kick in till probably about a minute and a half into the track. So honestly, it's really more like a 4.5 to 5 minute song, which fits in with everything else. The extended length is just an incredibly extended intro there. At least from the perspective of musical criticism. That's just saying that there's not a lot of musicality to the opening. It's atmosphere and sample and spoken word, which aren't really things I typically comment on too often. But I do think that it builds the sound and the song, and it does end up working well for the feeling, the vibe of the track overall. It's just that I only have about 5 minutes of worth of stuff to comment on, which is pretty much in line with everything else on this album. This song is dark, it's gritty. I likened it to Nine Inch Nails, and I mentioned that it's something Nine Inch Nails would be doing a little bit later. I was actually wrong on that. I didn't realize how early Nine Inch Nails started their career, and even the album I was thinking of, Downward Spiral, came out the same year as this. I don't know months, but it was the same year at the very least. So a contemporary album. I will say that Nine Inch Nails, I think, captured this filthy atmosphere a little bit better than Manic Street Preachers did, but that was also an album that hyper-focused on that sound and found multiple ways to explore it, whereas Manic Street Preachers are looking at a variety of sounds on this album, so it makes sense that not hyper-focusing on one, they didn't quite master it. They became more of a jack of all trades with their sound in general. But I don't think it's fair to compare artists in that manner, and I think that overall that track absolutely nails the atmosphere it's going for, at least enough to convey the emotion, texture, and detail that they wanted to. And as long as you're conveying what you want to, I'd say that the art is well crafted. But it is a gringy, dingy, industrial track here. It feels grimy, it feels mechanical, it feels machine-like. A lot of that comes down to, once again, the production of the track. But there's also the slowness of the riffage, too. There's the lack of snare and cymbal work on here that gives it a lower, rumbly sound from the percussion. Everything in here is designed to embody this feeling of a machine. This is the exact opposite of humanity. This is industrial. And I think it does a great job of juxtaposing pretty much the rest of this album. We've had a couple of tracks that kind of veer into a semi-industrial sound, but this is the only one that really leans into it as hard as it can. And I think it nails that vibe. But it's also moody. There's a brooding element to all of this. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be afraid of the atmosphere or if I'm supposed to be haunted by it. Either way, it's certainly not friendly, and it doesn't like that I'm here. And I can feel that. As far as the track title is called The Intense Humming of Evil, I kind of get the humming vibe, particularly the low end. The bass itself creates a nice low rumble to everything. Evil feels a little extreme. But I do think that there is a generally ominous vibe to all of this, which absolutely could feel evil to the right listener. In that sense, I think they nailed it. The guitar solo, once again, is fine. I think, once again, we have something that starts to veer into something interesting and just doesn't really get a chance to fully explore that. But we do hear a lot of noise towards the end of this track too, and the melodic solo kind of pushes into this realm. I'll give them that. And we have this constant deceleration of tempo at the end of the track too. And it feels like the machine is being bogged down, slowed down to a halt for some reason. The grinding slowly stops. It's an interesting track to wrap the song, or to almost wrap the album up. There's still 3 3/4 minutes left to go. But I do think this is one of their more intense tracks. And the one that feels the most vile. Let's check out some lyrics on this one. We'll see what's going on there. I suppose with a track like Mausoleum that references a modern visit to Hiroshima and Hitler showing up in Archives of Pain, I think it was. Maybe it was Revel, I don't remember. That we would get to a track about the Holocaust. Parts of this track are through the perspective of a Nazi of the time speaking to a Jewish person. And it's mostly degrading, as you would expect. We have the chorus, which says 6 million screaming souls, lives that wouldn't have changed a thing. They never counted, never mattered, would never be. The outro, though, after spending almost 4.5 minutes of creating this gnarly sound in general, I mentioned how it sounds very machine-like. It's, yeah, I mean, when you read about the death camps, there was a machine-like element to all of that. Sure, there's human inefficiencies throughout everything. Humans are fallible, but as far as eradicating people, I don't think we've really seen anything like how efficient and quickly the Nazis killed so many people. 6 million screaming souls. So we have this track that feels very machine-like. Bridges, verses, choruses, all about the Holocaust, the death camps in particular. And then the outro. I find this really interesting. It says, "Drink it away. Every tear is false." I presume this would be someone talking about Nazis, maybe even the Nuremberg trials, which are referenced in that opening minute-long sampled spoken word section, which is the beginning of the Nuremberg trials. It says, "The court has come, the court of nations. Into the court come the martyrs from these places. The dead will arise from their graves with flames, bringing acrid smoke and the deathly odor of scorched and martyred Europe. The children too will come, stern and merciless. The butchers had no pity on them. Now the victims will judge the butchers. Today the tear of the child is the judge. The grief of the mother is the prosecutor." So here in the outro, I think we come back to this idea that every tear of a Nazi is false. From the perspective of the lyricist, if you're going to be opposed to any of this, you would have challenged it before you got taken to court over it, before you were tried for your crimes. But then, in a very strange shift, it says Churchill is no different. Wish the workers bled to a machine. What I find intriguing about this is it draws parallels to the work camps of the Holocaust. We even have the German phrase starting off verse 2, Arbeits macht frei, work makes you free. That was commonly placed in the camps, the concentration camps, for the Jewish population to give them false hope. If you put the work in, you'll be released. Of course, that never happened, but that phrase was all over the place. But I think the parallel they're drawing here is that after the war was over, everyone just kind of went back to normal, which was still about exploiting a working class. The only difference is it isn't literal slavery like the concentration camps were, and we aren't literally putting people to death here. But the parallels are still there. I don't know if I 100% agree with this perspective, but I can see the parallels drawn. I can't really disagree with it, primarily because I see them on massively different elements of scale and direction. But the parallels are there nonetheless. And I think this, once again, lines up with the incredibly nihilistic components of this album. It is hyperbolic. It is generally extreme. It is vulgar. Track 1 introduced me to that, and they really haven't let off of the headline catching sentences in some of these tracks. This is one of those. It's not wrong, but it's also not right. It sits somewhere in the vague elements of truth. But it certainly feels like something that people who don't have a strong notion of optimism would come up with. I think it lines up really well with This Is Yesterday and Die in the Summertime. I kind of see it as a parallel track to Mausoleum, looking at another catastrophic moment in the loss of human life, but also paired well with the ways that we just kind of keep moving forward. We saw parts of this, I believe, in track 2, I think it was, about American culture seeping into English culture, and about the rise of capitalism and some of the destructive elements of the late stage capitalism on the working class. It's ultimately a track that says the past wasn't that great. The future doesn't seem great either. It's just a little it's a little better. Again, elements of degrees here, but I think that's generally what they're going for. When you read between the lines of the rather inflammatory statements, I do think that there's some shock value to this, but again, I don't think it's completely incorrect. And that sort of telling the truth through exaggeration seems to be Manic Street Preacher's MO. That's how they write lyrics. I don't know if it negates the strength of this song or embellishes it, but it wouldn't be the same if they had removed that final line. And with that said, my voice is getting a bit hoarse. 3.5 hours is certainly a bit on the longer side for these videos, but let's wrap up these last 4 minutes here. Not in any way of dismissing it or trying to get through it. We will give it the necessary respect and attention it deserves. But let's check out the final track, PCP. I like those double hits on the drums. Oh, I guess there are 3 hits. Da-da-dum, da-da-dum, da-da-dum. I do like the vocal harmonies here at the end.
227 years. I can't remember the first line.
I'm of two minds with this one. I think this is a solid single. It is fun, it's upbeat, it's highly energetic, very punky. It's another one of their anthemic tracks. Do I want this to wrap up an album as heavy as it's been, particularly here in the back half? I mean, the halfway point gave us Four Stones, and then we had Mausoleum, Die in the Summertime, Intense Humming of Evil. I mean, the first half of this album isn't lighthearted, but it is lighter musically. The back half is where things get intense. And yet we wrap it up on something upbeat like Faster, which was a few tracks ago, but more like some of the stuff earlier. Tracks 1 and 2 remind me more of this. Even Revel, track 6 was in the first half. Part of me thinks it should have ended on Intense Humming of Evil, but I suppose the argument for this would be that you don't want to end an album like this, which has been fairly varied, on a heavy note like this, so you bring some uplift. I'm sure that the lyrics are going to be just as intense as pretty much every other set of lyrics on this track. I'm not expecting any optimism in the final stretch of this race, but I don't know if I would want musical uplift here. I almost think that PCP, I mean, lyrically, I may change my mind on this, but I think if we had put that after Faster and then did Yesterday, Summertime, and Humming of Evil back to back as the final trio in this album, would have been incredibly intense and a strong finish. To go through all of those intense emotions and then hit this upbeat anthem just feels a bit anticlimactic to me. But that's just a personal taste. Like I said, some people may want a little bit of an uplift at the end of this track because track 12 is incredibly heavy. So pull the album up just a little bit to wrap it up. I can see the perspective even if I don't share the opinion. But otherwise, I don't really have a lot to add to this. Much like Faster and Revel, it's just fun, upbeat, very rhythmic based. We've kind of gotten rid of a lot of the textured stuff that we've been exploring on this. This is a fairly straightforward punky rock track here. The vocals, not much going on in there as far as unique sound. I would say that as far as production goes, whether it's post-production or effects pedals and stuff like that, this is the most traditional track on the album that explores all of these the least amount, maybe not even really much at all. More of a standard guitar tone. The vocals don't have any sort of splitting effect or phaser effect or reverb or anything going on with them. They're fairly raw-ish. Fine, medium produced, I guess you would call it. They're not underproduced to the point that they sound raw, but you definitely don't hear much production on them. There's got to be some. Otherwise, it would sound like, you know, an indie rock track or something. But it's medium produced. Not really a good word for that. We have underproduced, we have overproduced, and then just produced means you did stuff to it. I mean, I guess that technically classifies. But the guitars, they just sound like guitars. The bass just sounds like bass. The drums, they have that cool triplet thing at the beginning going on, but after that, they just kind of lock into standard grooves. So it just becomes a fairly standard track. We have another solo that feels cut short. We don't get a nice extended version of that on this track. It's just, I don't know, it feels like a return to norm, which even that in and of itself could be what this is about too. Quite a few tracks on this album have been catastrophe strikes, we mourn the day, and then we move on. The Intense Humming of Evil even makes that comparison right at the very end of it. To go through such an intense track and then just return to a typical radio rock anthem, maybe that's what they're trying to say with this. If so, I still think I prefer just ending on Humming of Evil, but at least I can see the artistic intent behind that decision. Being that I don't have much else to add to this one, I'm going to wrap up my thoughts here. This is going in my database with a solid 3 stars. I only rate out of 3 stars, so I'm quite impressed by this. I think that it is not always the best at conveying what it wants to convey, but it has tackled some wild topics with a sincerity that I don't always see. It almost feels as if they're not purposefully trying to be... Well, as you can see right in this moment, I'm trying to find the right words to say here. They feel like they're flying by the seat of their pants a little bit, just saying whatever comes to mind, whether it's super accurate, whether it's hyperbolic or not, and even if it's maybe a bit shocking. They don't care. It's what they're feeling in this moment, and that's what they're throwing out into the world. It is incredibly authentic, but sometimes hyperbolic and extreme. For some parts, I found the hyperbole to be a bit overdone, detracting from the ideas, but in others, I find the hyperbole to actually embellish the themes they're exploring. It is a bit of a daring sound, particularly again for 94. Some of the sounds in particular fit within the time, but I think lyrically, consistently, it is beyond what I would expect for the time. There's also the side that I can't ignore, that many of these tracks featured guitar tones, riffs, and chords that remind me of music that came after them. There's certainly a lot of this track that I feel familiar with in a way that I immediately want to re-listen to. That's not fairly common for me with music pre-2000s. And well, there have been a few, well, like I said, it's not common. There have been times when y'all have shown me like proto, post-hardcore, proto-emo stuff, proto-newcore, new metal. What is newcore? Has anybody smashed post-hardcore and new metal together? Call that newcore. Anyways, you know, some of the stuff that was around before the 2000 turn, when some of these genres became more mainstream, y'all have shown me some of the proto stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, dude, this sounds like some of my favorite bands from, you know, the century after. But for the most part, it's very rare for me to listen to something pre-2000s and think that it feels rather modern. And yes, I am calling the 2000s modern. That's still modern to me, dang it, dude. I mean, I know it's like almost 26 years ago, but we don't talk about that. The 2000s were yesterday, man. The 90s were last decade. Time, right? Time just flies. Anyways, I enjoyed this. I enjoyed reading about it. It is a heavy album. I'm not sure when I would come back to it lyrically. And actually, now that I know the lyrics, kind of hard not to come back to it. Even if I don't remember the specific lines, I still remember the themes for each of the tracks, and that's certainly going to inform my listening experience. But I'm just rather impressed by it. Let me hit some lyrics on PCP, and then we're going to wrap this one up. Well, I suppose there's always one. I wasn't a real big fan of putting this in the track list at this place. I still think that Yesterday, Summertime, and Humming are a perfect way to wrap up this bleak, nihilistic album. But I'm actually of the favor to just chuck this track out of the album list entirely and strip it down to 12 songs without it. Because I don't know what the third P stands, or the second P stands for here, although the chorus represents that it could mean police or etheric, but the first 2 letters are for political correctness. This is an anti-political correctness track, and it does so through the most ridiculous means ever. The straw man parallels here of political correctness being likened to Orwell's Big Brother is so mind-bogglingly I've been boggled. Mind-bogglingly stupid. I can't even figure that word out. It's so dumb. My brain has collapsed. I don't even. I think there is a part to this though that works. The outro says lawyers before love, surrogate sex. And I think the idea here kind of works in some ways. I'm really trying to give them credit because I've enjoyed the album so far. The idea that real human emotions and feelings and memories and stuff, that's what the love is supposed to represent, is being replaced with memorizing rules. You can't say this, you can't be this, you can't do this unless you do it the right way. And that removes the authenticity from it. And I'm still not sure what kind of music this is. I think alternative rock still fits really well, but they have punky ideas, and the punk ethos has always been sincerity and authenticity. So I can understand their perspective on this. Looking at the outro alone, I kind of get it. I do. And I'm going to draw a parallel in a second, but let me stick to what they're saying before I extrapolate. They open the track with "Teachers will starve your child. It's PC approved as long as the right words are used. Systemic atrocities are ignored as long as bilingual signs are viewed." The main element here at the beginning seems to be that there's real issues that politicians and lawmakers should be looking at. There are definitive ways to improve the lives of people. And instead, we're riling up a culture war about what you can and cannot say. And when you word it like that, the concept of thought police and Big Brother certainly makes sense. And to extend a bit of an olive branch, I will say that particularly, I don't remember, again, 94, I was a wee child, but, political correctness continued to expand over the years. And I will say that even me growing up, reaching adulthood in the mid to late 2000s, I can see parts where it went too far, absolutely. But it also did a lot of good too. Political correctness helps us talk about specific ideas in ways that aren't inflammatory and won't hurt people who are the most vulnerable. A lot of the ways that we talk about diseases and addiction and just ways that people are different from one another, mentally and physically, our vocabulary has changed in a way to reduce harm to the most vulnerable of our communities. And a lot of that is due to political correctness. I think that is a great aspect of it. Is it a perfect system? No. Did it go too far in cases? Yeah, I'm sure. Maybe not so much in the political landscape, but certainly in the cultural one. And this kind of extrapolates a little bit to today, where we have this idea that you must talk about things correctly. I've talked about this in the past, but the ways that technology and internet companies are dictating the way that we talk, the sanitization, the way that language has been sanitized online, that people don't say rape anymore. They'll say grape, or you don't hear the phrase sexual assault. It's now SA. And no one commits suicide, they unalived themselves. And it takes these really serious ideas and strips them of their weight. It almost becomes comical when you say someone graped someone. That is a stupid, funny sentence, because I'm picturing a Monty Python skit of someone throwing grapes at someone else. It reduces the severity of the conversation. I think that this is certainly taking corrective self-censorship too far, and it's particularly done for shareholders. It was done to make content on the internet, videos on the internet, more advertiser friendly. Like, that is just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. We are changing the ways we talk about serious things so that people can make money. That's just, it's frustrating. So, like, I can kind of sympathize a little bit with this, all right? Because I do see a line drawn temporally between political correctness of the 90s and where we are today with Google and TikTok telling us what we can and cannot say if we want to be advertiser friendly. There is certainly an element of self-censorship because of larger entities dictating what we should or should not say. Like, I get it. But to throw all of it under the bus, to throw the baby out with the bathwater, to have a line such as, where is this? Why can't I find it? PC caresses bigots and Big Brother. Just read Leviticus. Learnt censorship. Pro-life equals anti-choice. Just to be scared of feathers. Political correctness caresses bigots and Big Brother. So the people who win out by modifying their language are the bigots and the surveillance state? Maybe, again, in some extremes, sure, but generally speaking, a lot of the ways of understanding and flipping some of our language was to help the people who were already a minority, already most vulnerable. I have no understanding of what he means there. Such a ridiculous line. But he also says that when he was young, PC meant police constable, and nowadays he can't seem to tell the difference. Okay, man. You made a whole song, and he does have some choice words in here that are certainly not the best words to use, even in a modern context, but certainly back then. I'm going to assume that these were part of the words we should avoid so we can use these other ones. He threw them in here. He didn't go to jail for this song. Like, yeah, dude, it's just so dumb. The battles of this album, the hills that these people have chosen to stand on, are all fine hills. Granted, it created a nihilistic album, but at least I can see the perspective. And then this is another hill they decided to die on here? Really? I don't get it. But then here's another interesting thing. Verse 4, it says, liposuction for your bad mouth, boy. Cut out your tongue and effigies are sold. Okay. A lack of self-expression. I can see where you're going. It's still dumb, but I can see where you're going here. Then out of nowhere, he says, doctors arrested for euthanasia, kill smokers through blind vanity. Okay, this is an interesting line here. Doctors couldn't kill someone, euthanasia, but they could sell you cigarettes that would kill you. What's up with that? Got a Jerry Seinfeld thing going on. What's up with that? But what does that have to do with everything else going on here? Unless he's drawing a parallel between the governments that are telling you what you can and cannot say, and the governments will kill you. Like, I don't know, dude. The parallel starts to fall apart. I don't want to continue on this because honestly, I feel like I've talked about this track longer than any other track, and I feel like it's the one I should talk about least. I really don't want to give more attention to it. I don't agree with this track. I can kind of see where it's going. I think it makes some points, and then it veers off into a terrible argument realm and just stays there. And I don't know. Like I said, if this track had been booted, hit the cutting room floor, and the other 12 stayed in the order they were in, but not, well, Four Stone, still Mausoleum after that's a tough one. But the rest of this track, the rest of this album, I think flows nicely, and ending on 10 and 11 and 12 would have been phenomenal. Amazing album. These are my thoughts on Manic Street Preachers, The Holy Bible. An interesting title for this track, for this album. My brain is mush. We're almost at a 4-hour video. I am tired of analyzing stuff. What did you think of this? Did you enjoy it? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own take, perspective, opinion, whatever you want to add? Throw that stuff down in the comments. Y'all know how this goes. Link to Linktree in the description. My music, Patreon, special selections, anything. Find stuff in there. Click on it. Do cool things. Like, subscribe, ring the bell. I appreciate those. Share the video on, I don't know, Reddit or something. Do what you want to do, whatever feels right to you. I appreciate all of it. I'll be back tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a couple of hours. We're going to do a live stream. It's very cool. We check out music, we chit chat. It's a blast. It's chill. If you can make it, I suggest you do. I'll be back tomorrow. I already said that. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.